Yo, Atlas speaking, and welcome to part 2 of What If I Was Reborn into the Bleach universe and became the insane Vasto Lord. Let the tale begin. Chapter 31, Experiment. Kazuya crossed his arms as his gaze drifted across Mila Rose's naked body. "You're one terrifying exhibitionist kitten." She scoffed and picked up her shirt from the ground before putting it on. "Not more than you. When are you breaking your mask?" She couldn't fathom facing him if he received the same power boost as her upon becoming an Arrancar. However, it didn't matter, as she was determined to hone her skills and grow even stronger. "I wanted the same," said Surachi as she jumped down from the hill. "It's the single biggest power boost you can get as a Vasto Lord." "I did it." "She did it. When we're in need of desperate power, why are you backing out of it?" Having replenished a substantial portion of her Riryoku, Surachi had utilized some of her regained energy to clean herself and eradicate all traces of blood. Her silver mane now glistened with a captivating allure, revealing the meticulous effort she had invested in her appearance. Kazuya couldn't help but observe her once more, a regal mane joint with two droopy wings, and a sleek, dolphin-like tail trailing behind her, all the result of her damaged Zanpakuto, leaving her in a peculiar half-released, half-Arrancar form. "Wow, you went through all this effort just for me." "I'm so touched," he teased with a playful wink. "Here's a compliment for you, Surachi, our murderous goth chick. You look less fucked up than before." "Well done." His backhanded compliment earned him a glare that could have slain a dragon. "Don't change the topic. Are you perhaps afraid of failure? The big jerk who beat down two of the strongest Espada is afraid of death?" Kazuya shrugged. "I am more afraid of letting everyone down. As much as I trust in their abilities, they can't survive Barragan without me." It was just a sophisticated way of admitting he was afraid of dying mid-process. He was living quite the life in Hueco Mundo. It would be almost tragic if he died like that. Knowing his luck, it might just happen. He wasn't a coward. He was cautious. Mila Rose frowned. "Then don't fail, Skull. Here, I will break it with my sword." Kazuya caught her sword mid-strike and raised a brow. "Surachi, let's leave." "Kazuya, don't back out. Have trust in yourself," Surachi urged as she folded her arms. "The process is easy. Subdue your wildness and seal your powers in the form of an object." It's how Sale described it to Espada. She absolutely had no ulterior motive like witnessing his agonizing screams. Sale? That mad scientist? He is an Espada? Surachi's heart skipped a beat as she realized her mistake in bringing up Sale. She confessed to being a twisted soul, sometimes delighting in the suffering of others. But Sale was an entirely different species of sadist, a deranged lunatic with no qualms about pushing the boundaries of his experiments. The sheer terror he invoked was the sole driving force behind her allegiance to Barragan. Life held no particular value for her, but she would do anything to avoid becoming a specimen in his laboratory of horrors. Anything. "Hey, what's the matter?" Surachi felt a little calm after hearing his soothing voice. "Sale is Barragan's court alchemist. Numero uno Espada." "How do you know him?" "Damn. Give me the name of the rest of Espada, their abilities, their strengths, and their weaknesses." Surachi divulged the information without a moment's hesitation. While the Espada were comrades in the loosest sense, their alliance was born solely out of mutual subjugation to Barragan. No true bond of camaraderie united them like genuine soldiers. Kazuya became more and more surprised at the information being fed to him. How could he not? He never expected Espada under Barragan to be as powerful as they would become under Aizen and his Hogyoku. But the reality was completely different. Barragan had 7 Espadas serving under him, which got reduced to 5 with Dordoni and Surachi's departure. 1. Sailaporo. 2. Luppy Antenor. 3. Dordoni. 4. Loli. 5. Surachi. 6. Aranero. 7. Gantenbane. Kazuya marveled at the apparent weakness of the current Espada lineup. Aside from Sailaporo and Barragan, he anticipated little difficulty in defeating the remaining Espada. Their rankings weren't based on raw strength or their aspect of death like Aizen's Espada. Instead, they were determined by their usefulness and loyalty to Barragan. After battling Dordoni and Surachi, two of the strongest Espada, Kazuya had overestimated the might of Barragan's forces. Barragan is the only problematic opponent. Well, let's just have some relaxing time in Japan. The Hollow Ladies would appreciate a refreshing change of scenery, particularly Haribel, who harbored no love for bloodshed. Surachi regarded his contemplative expression. What are you thinking now? Surachi, can you use your tail ability? Yeah. What do you want to do? Do it for a second. I want to cut something. Make the spear as small as possible. Surachi lifted her tail and conjured a pink lance at its tip before it shrank into a dagger-like weapon. Kazuya seized her tail and brought the dagger close to his face, sensing the vibrating Ryatsu emanating from every edge of the blade. Rose, take this and cut a small part of my mask. Keep it as small as possible. Surachi's spear was the sharpest and most precise weapon at his disposal. Ugh! Surachi grimaced as she saw her tail being passed around. Mila Rose gripped her tail hard, enough to make her wince. Be gentle. Mila Rose laughed. Bear with it, woman. Kazuya closed his eyes, demonstrating unwavering trust in Mila Rose. She grasped his chin and carefully guided the dagger along the side of his mask. A tiny fragment of white mask tumbled to the ground. Kazuya flinched as a searing pain pierced his soul. In mere moments, the mask regenerated to its original size, confirming his hypothesis regarding his hollow mask. His regeneration powers had improved after his battle with Surachi. Amazing, Surachi murmured, all lacing her voice. I have never seen a hollow regenerate their mask, much less with a speed visible to eyes. Your regenerative power is both astonishing and terrifying. Surachi's praises reminded Kazuya of the other Arrancar who had similar regeneration powers, Ulquiorra Cypher. Their wings and horns looked different, but they both looked close to a typical demon. Are we related or what? He narrowed his eyes and beckoned Mila Rose. Get back to your Resurrection form and shatter my mask. If I fail to control myself, knock me out cold. I'll recover, eventually. The toughness of a hollow mask depended on their Ryuryoku level. With his great Ryuryoku, it would be hard to shatter his mask without a strong strike. Mila Rose's grin widened, revealing her ferocious lion fangs. I will chop your penis if you go berserk. You won't ever be able to mate. Knowing Kazuya's obsession with the act of mating, she threatened to cut off his most precious organ that allowed him to fulfill his sexual fantasies. The threat worked wonders as Kazuya shuddered visibly. Having experienced an injury close to his little brother, he was having traumatizing flashbacks. Don't even joke about that. Haha. Mila Rose stepped closer and held her Zanpakuto. How do you want me to strike? Horizontal, vertical or diagonal? Strike the middle of my face. Just don't leave cut marks. Kazuya closed his eyes, only to sense three presences closing in on him. Wait! Mila Rose paused and looked at Haribel and the rest. Skull, they're gonna chew you alive. Haribel crossed her arms on her chest, giving him a sharp look. How many times do I have to say this? Don't be reckless. Apache, on the other, seemed pissed. He tells me to hold off, then he pulls off something like this. Era, I'm sure he is taking the risk to protect us. However, Sun sharpened her reptilian eyes. At least inform us if you're making a decision of this stature. They seemed pissed at his choice to recklessly start the process behind their backs. Their anger showed their care for him. It also reminded him of his previous lover. Yumi was easy to anger but always cared about his well-being. It's not reckless, geez. Listen. Kazuya explained the reasoning behind his impulsive decision. Despite his sweet voice and persuasive skills, it took him a full minute to alleviate Haribel's fears, yet a hint of concern still shone in her eyes. Undeterred by their worries, Kazuya urged Mila Rose to proceed. Devour, Leona. Unleashing her released state, she swung her Zanpakuto with one hand, slicing his mask in two. Chapter 32 and 33, A Strange Zanpakuto. Kazuya crumpled to his knees, clutching his face in agony. Pain was no stranger to him, having lost an arm before, but this torment surpassed all previous experiences, even exceeding his initial death. Despite his pain-resistant skill, he felt like screaming ceaselessly, and in fact, he was screaming, oblivious to his own cries. Kazuya. Harabelle reached out to him, but her words vanished into the chaos surrounding him. Kazuya. His Ryatsu began to surge, trembling the very ground they stood upon. It dwarfed Mila Rose's Ryatsu, despite the fact she could rival a weak Vasto Lord's Ryatsu in her base Arrancar form. A wave of Ryatsu erupted like a deafening sonic boom, hurling everyone beyond his reach. Harabelle struggled to her feet, Kazuya now no more than a violet speck in the distance. His Ryatsu had propelled her that far. She raced back towards him, only to falter moments later, clutching her head. Kazuya's Ryatsu permeated the air, bearing down on her soul with suffocating pressure, causing her head to pound. It was as if gravity itself had intensified in the areas surrounding him. The Ryatsu was different from anything she had ever felt. It wasn't just powerful or massive. It felt alien. The thick and heavy energy felt like something other than Ryatsu. But Harabelle knew it was Ryatsu belonging to Kazuya. Wait for me. I'll be there. Determined and unyielding, Harabelle pressed onward, her eyes locked on Kazuya. Harabelle-sama. Mila Rose, gripping her broadsword tightly, followed Harabelle's lead, with the others a mere step behind, united in their commitment to aid Kazuya as he had once helped Mila Rose with her Arrancar transformation. However, their progress was short-lived, halted after a dozen steps. Kazuya's Ryatsu bore down on them like an oppressive weight, sapping their willpower to the point they felt terrified of taking another step in his direction. Apache let out a strangled cry, her legs trembling under the relentless pressure. What the hell is this? This Ryatsu is too much. This Ryatsu is different from his. Mila Rose, faring better than Apache and Sung Sun, discerned the unique property of the Ryatsu. It's sinister and cold. We can't go further, Sung Sun whispered calmly as she moved back. Let's retreat for now. Apache gave her a death glare. I'm not going anywhere. I'll help him. Sung Sun hissed. Don't you fucking give me that look. I want to help Kazuya as much as you. What the fuck can we do? Apache recoiled, terrorized by Sung Sun's furious eyes. Never before had the snake lost her composure, but the sight of her friend writhing in agony pushed her to the edge. She felt utterly powerless. Reluctantly heeding Sung Sun's words, Apache and Mila Rose withdrew and regrouped with Surachi. She looked terrified of his Ryatsu far more than the three. It's stronger than Baragon. Baragon, having dwelled in Hueco Mundo for an unknown length of time, had amassed Ryoryoku through innumerable battles. He was considered the hollow with the most potent Ryatsu in Hueco Mundo. Yet, Kazuya, the young hollow, displayed a Ryatsu that eclipsed even Baragon's. The difference was staggering. Surachi realized that Kazuya's dream of slaying Baragon would become reality. If he survives. Arg! Apache screamed out in frustration and stomped the ground. What the hell do we do? We can't leave him be. What can we do? Cyan Sung Sun murmured, despair in her voice. We have to trust Harabelle-sama. Harabelle hadn't stopped for a second, even if her pace looked shaky. Sung Sun put her trust in her leader to save the day. Mila Rose flung her Zanpakuto aside and tugged at her hair in despair. Though her Ryatsu might have neared Harabelle's in her Resurrection form, she couldn't harness it after exhausting her Ryoryoku during training. Even if she could assume her Resurrection form, she wouldn't have advanced farther than Harabelle. Damn it. It's my fucking fault. It's not the time to blame yourself. Apache gritted her teeth audibly, her fiery gaze on the cocoon in the distance. Sung-sun, you said you were smart and efficient. Think about something. Surachi, stop standing there. What do you want me to do? Panic gripped all four of them, each expressing it in their own way. Three genuinely cared for Kazuya's well-being, while the former Espada simply wanted him alive to fulfill his promise of revenge against Baragon. I am doing my best. Wait, it ended. Their attention snapped to Kazuya's cocoon, which began to fracture, his Ryatsu gradually receding. They sprinted towards him with every ounce of speed they could muster. Haribel, with her superior sonido, reached him first, catching him before he could tumble from the cocoon. As she knelt on the ground, she tenderly pressed a hand against his face, unfazed by the viscous fluid that coated him. Feeling his breath and the steady beat of his heart, she drew him into her embrace. You scared me. I thought you wouldn't survive. Holding him like this, she realized the depth of her affection for him. If he had died, she would have been consumed by madness. You're my family. Unconscious, Kazuya was unable to hear her gentle murmurs. Perhaps it was for the best, as he would likely have responded with something offensive or teasing. Haribel-sama, is he all right? Apache's voice trembled with urgency as she inquired. Is he safe? Haribel replied, her voice a low murmur, oozing with fatigue. The oppressive Ryatsu had almost knocked her out. Just unconscious. Mila Rose was so energetic after her thing, Apache mused. This guy does everything like an anomaly he is. I also can't become a human either, Mila Rose retorted, rolling her eyes. She knelt beside Haribel, poking his face with a curious finger. A viscous, milky substance stuck to her fingertip, and she hesitantly tasted it. Grimacing, she spat onto the ground, desperate to get rid of its weird flavor. Yuck, it's so salty. Apache stared at Mila Rose. Don't taste everything you see. Sung-sun exhaled a sigh of relief, studying the changes that had occurred in Kazuya's body. Haribel's protective embrace obscured the full extent of his transformation, but as if sensing Sung-sun's gaze, she tenderly lowered him onto the ground, allowing them to observe everything. Wow! A collective gasp echoed from three Ajuchas. Even Haribel's eyes widened in awe. The most striking transformation was Kazuya's face, no longer hidden behind a mask. Instead, two imposing horns curved at the sides of his head, remnants of his once fearsome hollow mask. Mila Rose patted his face. Why does he look so fucking powerful in this form? Apache nodded at Mila Rose's words. Following this pattern, I will have a horn on my forehead, which will help me with Zero. She could predict the direction of her Arrancar form after witnessing two Arrancar transformations. Sung-sun flicked her tongue, imagining all the possibilities. I will keep the earrings. I like them. Do any of you see Kazuya's Zanpakuto? Mila Rose's eyes darted around, only to land on something utterly unexpected. No way! That's, Surachi's jaw hung open. Blast. It can't be his Zanpakuto. The group received another shock. They were truly speechless this time around. Let's leave before Hollows get curious. Haribel lifted him in his arms, finding him far more hefty than his form implied. Rose, take his Zanpakuto. Haribel hesitatingly addressed it as his Zanpakuto. Mila Rose lifted the round object in the air like a prize trophy. I can't wait for him to wake up. Ha ha ha. She couldn't help but grin, envisioning the sweet taste of revenge for all the teasing she'd endured, her laughter ringing out once more. Surachi felt a tug at her lips. Mila Rose's energy was infectious. She stepped forward and placed a hand on Haribel's shoulder. Haribel, you're not in the best shape. Let me carry him. It was a rare moment for Surachi to offer assistance on her initiative. After seeing the party work things out, she had to offer something. Mila Rose pointed at herself with her thumb. Yo, let me. I got stronger arms than this petite lady. Who are you calling petite? Surachi frowned, missing her whip more than ever. Brute. Mila Rose's brow twitched. You want to fight? Stop this meaningless fight right this instant. Sung-sun hissed. Haribel-sama, do you need help? Haribel held Kazuya closer instead of separating from him like a mother clinging to her son. I can do it. The colossal surge of Ryatsu ensnared the attention of nearby hollows, regardless of their strength. They could feel the spiritual presence of a terrifying being, compelling them to stay far away. On the outskirts of a village alive with the chatter, a centaur-like hollow stood guard. Her head swiveled to the north, her grip on her lance involuntarily tightening. The ancient Ryatsu sent shivers cascading down her spine. She couldn't fathom the fate that had befallen the hollows in closer proximity to the source of this ominous power. Could they have died? Her hazel eyes flickered, narrowing into a razor-sharp focus. I have to investigate. Hollow's evolution Arankar, first form, achieved. Kazuya's eyes flickered open to a system prompt announcing his recent achievement. I'm alive, barely. He couldn't fathom what might have happened if he hadn't acquired the pain-resistant skill. He surely wouldn't have made it out alive. Feeling the familiar cool embrace of skin beneath him, he instantly recognized he was lying on Haribel's thighs. Fatigue weighed heavily on every muscle in his body, yet he couldn't help but smile, knowing the ever-devoted Haribel remained by his side. This obsessed mommy. You're awake, Haribel noted, sensing the fluctuations in his Ryatsu. You gave us all a scare. With considerable effort, he sat up, rubbing his head as the world swirled around him. His Ryoryoku had barely recuperated while he lay unconscious. I didn't think I'd survive either. That was extraordinary. It's all in the past. You're an Arankar now. I guess I am. He summoned his status and observed his model. What the fuck? His Arankar form portrayed him without a mask, but with the same distinctive horns curving on either side of his head. The most significant change, however, was in his attire. He donned a white ensemble that revealed a symbol on his chest, a black outline resembling a phoenix. The hollow holes on his legs had vanished, replaced by metal shackles encircling his wrists and ankles, trailing a remnant of chain. He appeared like a runaway prisoner. I ran away from Gramps, so it makes sense? Like hell it does. He tried taking off the shackles, but they were stuck fast. He clicked his tongue. Haribel, where is my Zanpakuto? I can't feel it. It's here. Feast your eyes on the strongest Zanpakuto in existence. As if waiting for an opportunity, Mila Rose rushed into the cave and thrust a football-sized egg into his hands. The egg's shell bore a pale violet hue, its surface mimicking the texture of Sung-sun's scales. More importantly, the egg continuously released a small amount of Ryatsu akin to his own. Haribel placed a hand on his shoulder. This magically appeared at the place of your transformation. We believe it's your Zanpakuto. Kazuya watched, speechless. I laid an egg. What the hell is happening? He knocked on the egg. Anyone there? Is this like the case with Stark? Coyote Stark's Zanpakuto had taken the form of another hollow, Lilinet. But a Zanpakuto in the shape of an egg, that was an entirely unprecedented phenomenon. I see a phoenix mark on my chest. Will the egg give birth to a new me? He shuddered at the thought of another him running around the world, causing as much chaos as him if not more. Nah, it can't be another human. It has to be a creature. The events unfolding were even more bizarre than the fact he reincarnated in the world of Bleach. There must be a reason behind the egg being his Zanpakuto, one that would surely be revealed when the egg cracks. Chapter 34, Jealous Deer. Apache and the others crowded into the cramped confines of the cave. It didn't take a moment for Sung-san and Mila Rose to start verbally berating each other. He felt like a father watching over a bunch of rowdy kids arguing for candy. Surachi scrutinized Kazuya with piercing eyes, as though attempting to decipher his very essence. How do you feel? Thanks for your concern, but I'm doing fine. He glanced down at the egg cradled in his lap. Except for this. What in the world is this? Surachi snickered. I have no idea. Do you want to consult Dr. Sale of Las Noches? He might solve your problem. I'll hand you over to him while I'm at it. He will love tearing apart a half-assed abomination of a goth chick. Last I recall it happened when I was fighting you. You are the reason I am an abomination. Despite her accusatory words, she didn't blame him for anything. She had torn her wings and extra limbs out of her volition. Blaming him for her decision would be unfair, especially for an action taken when they were mortal enemies. Just kidding. You're not an abomination. He grinned, eyes twinkling. You're the second most beautiful hollow in the world. Harabel is first. Apache nudged Surachi out of the way, pushing her closer to the entrance in a fit of jealousy. Her resentful gesture raised a chuckle out of him. Apache, I'm glad you didn't act recklessly this time. In the deepest recesses of his mind, he could picture Apache ripping her mask apart in a frenzy the moment anything befell him. She cared about him, otherwise, she wouldn't have risked her life to protect his possession. Apache lowered her head, her voice a whisper. It wouldn't have made a difference. Tearing her mask would bring her on par with Mila Rose, who was also struggling in the net of his Ryatsu. He reached out, affectionately rubbing her crest. You did well. Humph. Sung-Sun's serpent-like tongue flickered and licked the eggshell before slithering it across his cheek. A similar taste. Mila Rose's laughter roared. So, the skull has truly become a mother. Who's the father, though? Kazuya's hand flew to his mouth, feigning shock. Did your kiss do it? You better take responsibility for this. Mila Rose found herself at a loss for words, her mouth agape. She'd intended to gain the upper hand with the egg, but Kazuya had effortlessly flipped the situation back onto her. Sung-Sun poked Mila Rose's face with her tongue. I warned you this was useless. You can't triumph over superior beings such as Kazuya and myself. Inferior beings should just admit defeat and bow before us. You, Mila Rose clenched her sword. I'll kill you. Era. Don't resort to violence. Aard. Sung-Sun slithered out of the shadowed cave, Mila Rose hot on her heels with her Zanpakuto. Surachi followed them to make sure Mila Rose didn't end up killing Sung-Sun. They will never change, he muttered, shaking his head. Just to set the record straight, what I said was a joke. I'm still very much a man. I'm talking to you, Harabel. Don't start treating me like a girl. I know, Harabel exhaled a soft sigh. I might not join in your banter, but I can understand your sense of humor. They severely underestimated her observation skills. Why does it matter? Apache inquired. Man or woman, she treats all of us with the same affection. Kazuya's face twitched. Apache was aware of his interest in Harabel, yet asked such a weird question. It was very much an attempt to poke the hornet's nest. He was way too exhausted to deal with her right now. Before he could respond, Harabel intervened. With her sword arm, she slapped Apache's back, a resounding thwack echoing through the chamber. Let him rest. Come outside. Hey, don't hit me! Harabel continued striking Apache's back until she drove the deer out. Looking over her shoulder, she sighed. Kazuya, don't indulge Apache too much, let her learn to walk before she runs. Kazuya tilted his head, waiting for an explanation. Harabel gave none whatsoever and left the cave. What did she mean? Come to think of it, she still hasn't told me about that favor. Being quiet and observant, Harabel rarely shared her feelings and mostly kept to herself. I'll think about it later. Kazuya collapsed onto the frigid sand floor, the mysterious egg nestled securely against his chest. He checked his status for any new ability. General information. Name Kazuya Ishihara. Gender male. Race hollow, Vasto Lorde-Class. Ryuryoku level great level, Captain Class Plus. Alignment neutral evil. Affiliation unnamed faction. Racial abilities. Zero, Ryuryoku offensive technique. Mastery level high. Sonido, movement technique. Mastery level high. Discorer, limited spatial distortion technique. Mastery level basic. Iero, Ryoryoku defensive technique. Mastery level basic. Resurrección, Zanpakuto release. Mastery level none. Pesquisa, perception technique. Mastery level none. Innate abilities. Silvery voice. Oppression, aspect of death. Crumbling heart, hollow. Regeneration. Acquired abilities. Phoenix symbol, ridiculous healing power, and now an egg. Despite his demonic appearance, all signs showed he wielded the power of a mythical phoenix or something similar. At least I received some decent clothes, he mused, focusing on the silver lining of his transformation, as was his nature. Also Iero and Pesquisa. Chapter 35, I Am Your Salvation. Kazuya had immense control over his Ryatsu in his hollow form due to the innate power of his hollow mask. His human form didn't have the same luxury. He used his resting time to fine-tune his control and hide his Ryatsu from others, which required him to keep his Ryoryoku from leaking out, a skill with great use in the living world. He trained for a scant few hours before boredom forced him out of his resting place. Harabel, protect this baby while I'm away. Surachi, let's go. Harabel cradled the egg and patted it gently with her left hand. Her tender gaze was very much like a mother. I'll protect your child with my life. Her solemn words, paired with her motherly expression, left Kazuya momentarily speechless. Harabel, it's our child. Harabel stared at with wide eyes before she gave a look of understanding. Her hunch about Kazuya was true all along. It's solely yours. Surachi traced a line in the air, opening a garganta with the same ease as Kazuya. Leave the talk for later. Let's leave. She vaulted inside, and he plunged after her without hesitation. Suddenly, a maelstrom of turbulent rancor swept through the vast void, forcing Surachi against his chest. Instinctively, he unfurled his wings, now twice as expansive as before, and stabilized their footing with a platform of Ryatsu. Phew, that nearly spirited us away to some unknown place. The opportunist Kazuya held her by her side, his arms encircling her waist. He reveled in the delicate tickle of her feathers against his skin and her warmth. Leaning forward, he pressed a kiss to her nape. Don't worry. You're in the safest place in the world. Even if we were transported to some medieval fuckery, I'll protect your virginity. Not for myself, of course. Surachi elbowed his chest, which did nothing against his Iero defense. Left with no choice, she shoved him with her shoulder. Quit fooling around. How the fuck are you so horny all the time? There are more things in the world than chasing women. Hollows, the creatures of instincts, showed not sexual excitement but hunger for her ratio-rich body. He was one of the rare cases of a hollow indulging in carnal desires, as she noticed in his interactions with his friends. Kazuya took a dramatic pause. Being so full of hormones is a pain. Did I mention I am just a month old? Newborns are always full of curiosity. He blamed his lust on his new body. Barragan won't care if you're 1 or 10 months old. You should stop this tomfoolery and focus on training your new abilities. Nada. I want to live a fun life, even if it bites me in the ass later. Surachi's fists tightened. If only every hollow were as carefree as you, Hueco Mundo wouldn't be a pit of despair. Sadly, most hollows pursued their base instincts, rendering Hueco Mundo the most desolate place to exist, apart from maybe hell. She dispelled the disheartening thoughts encroaching on her spirit, refusing to succumb to despair before eliminating the source of her hatred, Barragan and Sale. Kazuya was no fool, he understood the implications behind Surachi's whispers. Her aspect of death had to be despair or a closely related sentiment, a negative one. A cunning plan to cure her depression and gain her loyalty formed behind his smile. Despair, he murmured. It's pent-up anger with nowhere to go. The darkest clouds, eager to unleash their fury, yet forever trapped. It suffocates you, never enough to take your life. It's the darkness that makes us question the meaning behind every action. Surachi found herself unable to tear her eyes from his solemn expression, her heart resonating with his words. He had correctly described her feelings. Despair it's just pure suffering. It is, but... He raised a finger. Only in the darkness can you truly see the light. So, tell me, Surachi, would you rather keep your head down and never see the light, or allow me to guide you to the radiance of salvation? He extended his hand, a benevolent smile gracing his lips. Had he been born in the medieval era, he might have been the most revered pope of his time. Unconsciously, Surachi placed her hand in his, falling deeper into his web of manipulation. As the magic of his voice faded, she came to her senses and abruptly withdrew from him. It's impossible. I am a hollow. There's no future for us, for me. I can never have the peaceful life I desire. His persuasive words and honeyed voice exposed her deepest insecurities, the insecurities that were born when she wandered the world as an ajuchas. She had searched the entire Hueco Mundo, but there wasn't anything which could fill the gaping hole in her heart. Nothing she did ever made her feel genuinely satisfied. The hole in her heart made her question the meaning of her existence. The meaning of Hueco Mundo and the entire species of hollows. She constantly lived through a mental state akin to those experiencing an existential crisis. She wasn't a special hollow to realize the despair that awaited their race. Any powerful hollow with a semblance of intelligence would feel the dread deep down in their hearts. But their desires and hunger kept them from pondering such deep questions. What you feel is the dread of an existential crisis, he said, reaching out to stroke her mane. The only escape is through self-discovery. Surachi, I can change that mindset and guide you to happiness. Will you give me a chance? Surachi shook her head, distancing herself from him with a sense of melancholy. What even is the point? You should spend that time and energy on honing your skills. The broken state of her Zanpakuto only served to intensify her feelings of despair. Just give me 1 day of your time. If I can't solve your problem, I won't bother you. There had to be something in the living world, some fun activity, some object, a comforting pet, anything that could elevate her spirits and drag her soul out of the pit of despair. He didn't love her enough to go to extraordinary lengths, but she would be an invaluable ally in guiding him through Las Noches. Besides, witnessing her in such a vulnerable state stirred genuine sympathy within him. Or I just have a soft spot for goth girls. She unclenched her fists and released a resigned sigh. Fine. With the matter settled, Surachi dashed through the void, leaving a trail of pale pink Ryatsu beneath her feet. Without warning, she halted and flicked the air, causing the fabric of space around them to fracture. She stepped back and charged headlong into the fissure, shards of glass-like space erupting in a brilliant explosion all around. Kazuya clapped at the mystical display. Sheesh. Chapter 36, Encounter in Town. Kazuya sped after Surachi, soon finding himself hovering above a bustling road. Cars zoomed by below, their screeching horns and shrieking brakes reverberating through the stormy night. The familiar landscape of Japan surrounded him, but there was an unmistakable difference in the atmosphere. Billboards promoting games or anime were conspicuously absent, and video advertisements were nowhere to be seen. The city, devoid of its usual vibrancy, felt strangely subdued. Of course, nobody around them reacted to the massive fracture in the sky. A rain-soaked newspaper, carried by the wind, caught his attention. Most of the text in the newspaper was illegible, but the date in the top right corner remained fairly visible, May 3, 1950. Did I arrive here on the 1st of April? It seemed as though his reincarnation happened as an April Fool's joke. It made all the sense in the world when he recalled his Zanpakuto as shape. Suppress your Ryatsu as much as you can, Surachi advised. We should change our locations. I know. Don't start acting like my mom. Kazuya paused and shook his head. What am I saying? I never had a mom. Surachi, would you be so kind as to adopt me as your child? Surachi flipped her middle finger in his face. Buzz off. Haha, You can leave now. I'll call you when I want that one day. He waved his hand with a charming smile. Do consider my proposal about adopting me. It'll be fun being my mommy, you know? Pervert. Surachi reopened Garganta and glanced at him over her shoulder. Don't get killed. Aw, you're such a considerate mom, he teased. If Barragan attacks in my absence, bring the girls over here. Do not fight him, I repeat. I know his strength, Kazuya. It'll be foolish for us to engage him head-on. I'll do as you say. When will you return there? A few days at the very least. He had to use the opportunity to scout some things. Surachi nodded and vanished into the void, the fractures in the space healing on its own. Kazuya, now alone, looked around the street. What's in fashion in this era, I wonder? He spotted a clothing shop on the same street, saving him the trouble of searching all over the city. A glance at the shop's address and he was left dumbfounded. Karakura Town. What absurd luck is this? There could be another reason for Surachi to be drawn to this place. Karakura Town was a concentrated spirit zone. The town concentrated the greatest spiritual beings in the world. Should I stay around? Urahara and Yoruichi should be here in that shop. He decided to stick around for some days instead of leaving for another town. After swiftly borrowing some fancy clothes, Kazuya ducked into a shadowy alley and transformed into his human form, donning the perfect disguise to explore the town. He ruffled his unruly hair, which seemed to be the wildest part of his get-up. Let's spend the night in some hotel? The thought of sleeping on a soft bed raised his spirit. Apache's meaty body or Sung Sun's snake body couldn't bring him the comfort of a real bed. So much to do. Strolling alone in this form, particularly amid unfamiliar surroundings, left him feeling exposed, as though he was walking around naked. He had grown accustomed to the power of oppression at his fingertips. One could argue that he had embraced his hollow identity wholeheartedly, and the 4 hollow women gave him ample reason to remain hollow for the rest of his days. Wouldn't it be simple to make me the strongest from the start? He sighed, feeling wronged by the one who had reincarnated him. He might have skipped honing his other races if hollows hadn't been the weakest race in the world of Bleach. The mightiest Arrancar, Yami, could perhaps contend with 1 or 2 captain-class adversaries simultaneously, but he was mere cannon fodder for behemoths like Aizen and Yhwach. He had to train the other races to their maximum or perhaps find a way to fuse them. Those were the only ways for him to survive the disasters Aizen and Yhwach would bring to the world without leaving everything on Ichigo. As he rounded a corner, he halted, petrified, for a long moment. The eruption of Ryatsu hadn't gone unnoticed by the spiritual beings lurking within Karakura Town. The presence of 2 formidable hollows had drawn these powerful entities out from their lairs. One such being was a tall Shinigami perched atop a house, a bucket hat concealing his visage. The hat's green and white stripes imbued him with an air of frivolity. The saying "don't judge a book by its cover" was tailor-made for individuals like Keisuke Urahara. Despite his laid-back demeanor, he was a fearsome genius who had crafted an array of specialized equipment that aided the Soul Society even to this day. He is probably here after Aizen pinned his crimes on him. Urahara was accused of conducting experiments on his fellow Shinigami. That's how the Soul Society remembered the former captain of the 12th Division and the founder of the Shinigami Research and Development Institute. In reality, Aizen was the one performing such experiments on Shinigami. Knowingly or unknowingly, Aizen had created an enemy out of one of the most dangerous people in the world. Does Urahara still have Hogyoku? At some point, Urahara would deactivate his version of Hogyoku and conceal it within Rukia's soul. Kazuya was unsure if that had already transpired in this timeline. As it stood, Hogyoku would prove immensely valuable to him, as it could safely convert Sung Sun, Apache, and Harabel into perfect Arrancar without risk. The only 2 versions of Hogyoku were in the possession of Urahara and Aizen. He sure as hell wasn't going anywhere close to Aizen this early, so he had to get the Hogyoku from Keisuke at any cost. Let's troll him a little. Kazuya gave a bright smile as he waved at Keisuke Urahara. Hey, don't stand there in the rain. You'll slip and break your legs. He was flirting with disaster by taunting one of the most formidable Shinigami. One could say he was courting death. Chapter 37, Quincy? Kazuya paid no heed to the shouts, assuming they were directed at someone else. His attention was consumed by deciphering the dual-type spiritual presence left by two hollows. These spiritual presences were akin to those of his visored friends but carried a more distinct hollow aura than the visored's hollow aura. Hollows who have acquired Shinigami powers. Arankars. He had encountered information about them in the Soul Society's archives but never had the opportunity to meet one with such formidable power. Yet the question lingered, why had two Arankars infiltrated his town? If they sought to act like typical hollows and consumed souls, they would have caused an uproar. Instead, their stealthy approach made him uneasy. You with the green hat. Don't ignore me, jerk. Kazuya's wandering thoughts were disrupted when a stone hurtled toward his face. With lightning-fast reflexes, he tilted his head just enough to evade the projectile and lifted his hat to glimpse at the public offender. What he saw left him dumbstruck. The man standing in the street appeared to be an ordinary citizen, save for a faint trickle of Ryoryoka seeping from him. The man's Ryatsu barely qualified him as a spiritually aware human. Kazuya couldn't shake the feeling that he had encountered a similar Ryatsu before. Skeptical, Kazuya raised his hand in greeting. Quite the rude fellow, aren't you? Have you never seen a handsome man enjoying the rain on a roof? I have. In fact, I used to be like you when I was a teenager. It was fun pissing down from my roof on rainy days. Those were fun times, man. My, that's just gross. You should try it sometime. It feels relaxing and therapeutic. Pissing in the rain is scientifically proven to lower your stress. Kazuya shook his head and looked over his shoulder. That's enough grossness for today. I will see you around. The approaching group of Shinigami left him with no choice but to stop his unpleasant talk. He used Shuimpa and flashed to the sky, his form assimilating with the darkness. As the Shinigami began to look around the scene, the silver-haired youth just stood there, baffled. For a human, he showed an appropriate reaction to see men in kimonos jumping all over the place. That was merely the beginning, as two cars rolled onto the scene. A woman with short black hair and a stern, piercing gaze emerged from the first car. She exuded an aura of dignity and authority befitting her status in Karakura town. Izumi Ishida, an Quincy, pure-blood Quincy, as well as the current matriarch of the Ishida family. She had recently married Soken Ishida, another Quincy, in an effort to keep their Quincy bloodline pure. Somehow, she appeared exceptionally pissed today, perhaps furious about being roused from her sleep at 12 a.m. Kazuya didn't linger, as he had already planted a spy within the Ishida family. He wasn't concerned about the Quincy collaborating with Hollows for an unexpected alliance. A very unlikely event, but it was better to have safe measures for every incident, or so Kazuya Urahara believed. When will I find a good vessel for Hogyoku? Unbeknownst to him, a demon had already set its sights on his disastrous invention, a demon who would soon change Kazuya Urahara's entire world. Kazuya was struck motionless as the raven-haired woman emerged from her car. Her icy gaze, sharp frown, and commanding presence reminded him of someone who had once held a special place in his heart. What the hell is with her uncanny resemblance to Yumi? Who is she? Most of the characters he had encountered until now possessed easily identifiable traits: Harabelle for her shark-like characteristics, Apache for her name, Surachi for her goth girl appearance, and Kazuya for his shady hat. The woman before him was different. Despite her undeniable beauty, her Quincy necklace and intense gaze were her only distinguishing features. A rich lady Quincy equals free hotel service. As the woman walked, she stumbled, seemingly injured in her left leg. Move! You're obstructing our official work. Kazuya rubbed the back of his head and glanced at the Shinigami squad. Wani-san, I'm new in town. Do people in Karakura cosplay as samurai? How can they jump so high? Do they possess supernatural abilities? Izumi, who was about to walk away, widened her eyes. His voice enveloped her in a sense of serenity, as though she was taking a stroll in a vast forest. The man and woman in white uniforms behind her displayed similar reactions of surprise to both his voice and his ability to perceive the spiritual world. "You can see them?" asked Izumi slowly as she hobbled to his side. "Are you a descendant of some hidden survivor?" The Quincy massacre 150 years prior had left their race in disarray. Some prominent Quincy chose for a life of solitude, distancing themselves from matters of the spiritual world. Consequently, numerous young Quincy grew up ignorant of their ancestral history. Izumi surmised that Kazuya might be one of those lost Quincy descendants. To preserve the Quincy race, she needed all remaining Quincy to unite so they wouldn't be killed off easily. She was a firm believer of the power in numbers motto. Kazuya rubbed his chin, frowning as if he tried to recall something. "You mean Quincy? My mom told me to seek guys with crosses in this town before she passed away." Izumi clutched the Quincy cross tied hanging from her neck, bringing his attention to the silver necklace. "This cross?" Kazuya's face lit up. "That's it. That's the one my mom told me about. You guys are the Quincy. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, it's really hard to get it right." He sprinkled a dash of innocence into his words, perfecting his naive act. "No worries. Would you like to come with us?" Izumi threw out an offer, willing to take a chance to test his potential. Even if he was a gemished, mixed breed, with limited potential, she could find a purpose for him in their clan. It was a much better fate than being eaten by some hollow far away from any help. "Are you kidding?" "Of course I will. I want to know more about this Quincy stuff. Akira, Katsumi, escort our guest." "Yes, Izumi-sama." "As you wish, Izumi-sama." Kazuya followed the two gemished Quincy, a pep in his walk. Meanwhile, Izumi cast a sidelong glance at the Shinigami squad. They exchanged hushed words before dashing in different directions, seeking further clues on the incident. "I'll have to keep an eye on Shinigami until Soken-san returns. It's been 3 weeks." Her eyes lingered on the moon, finding comfort in its solitary presence as it cast a silvery glow over the landscape. Chapter 38, Mommy? Upon her return to Hueco Mundo, Surachi could feel the Ryatsu of Apache and the others in the distance, but the only one she saw was Haribel, sitting alone in the cave with her back pressed against the wall and an egg on her lap. "You're back." Haribel broke the silence. "Did you find any Shinigami?" "No, we didn't." Surachi responded, her voice barely audible as she quietly nestled herself into a shadowy corner of the cave. "He told me to wait for a few days." "Surachi," Haribel said, her tone laced with uncertainty, "do you believe he should make his return to Hueco Mundo?" "Why should he not? His friends are all here. I have seen how much he cares for you and the rest. He even lost an arm protecting you from me, temporarily." Surachi found the question unbelievably dumb, but she didn't say it to Haribel's face. As much as she looked down on Kazuya's playful nature, she admired him for his unwavering loyalty. If it was any other hollow with his ability to switch races, they would have long abandoned Hueco Mundo for the living world. But Kazuya didn't find her logic appealing. He prioritized his companions, otherwise, he wouldn't have waited this long to leave Hueco Mundo. She couldn't fault him for the decision. Haribel raised her head and regarded Surachi with an intense stare. "Are those your honest thoughts?" Surachi paused for a moment before she furrowed her brows. "If I was in his situation, I would never return to this hellhole. This place disgusts me beyond words." She didn't hold back on her hatred for Hueco Mundo, the place that gave her nothing but despair. Haribel offered a nod of acknowledgement before lowering her head. "Thank you for aiding me in making my decision." "What decision?" "I'll tell when the others are back." After a few odd minutes, a lively chatter could be heard outside the cave. "Apache, what the hell is wrong with you? How can you eat so many souls?" "Era, Apache is a growing woman. Let her eat as much as she wants." "What Sun said." Apache and the rest casually strolled into the cave in high spirits. All three feasted on the Jillians that attacked Apache before. It was a feast that Apache fully used to amass power. Yo! Mila Rose greeted Surachi with a grin. How's Skull doing over there? Did he start flirting with some girls? Surachi shook her head in response. He is good. I don't know if he is flirting with anyone, but that guy asked me to become his mommy? Can you believe it? Surachi tried to make Mila Rose's smile wider but ended up triggering Haribel with her words. Haribel's eyes snapped open, and her gaze locked onto Surachi. What did you say? The atmosphere in the cave went cold from the Vasto Lord's voice. Surachi felt like she was being ripped apart alive under Haribel's sharp Ryatsu and buttload of killing intent. She pushed back with her own Ryatsu, which didn't seem to be enough to contend against a mature Vasto Lord like Haribel. She might have been unfazed if she was at her peak. In her current state she was no match for Haribel's icy Ryatsu. Why, you? Surachi misinterpreted Haribel's actions as a brazen effort to intimidate and assert dominance over her, the newest member, in Kazuya's absence. She stood her ground, refusing to submit to such oppressive tactics. These are your true colors, Haribel. The crushing pressure bore down exclusively upon Surachi, who trembled under its intensity. Observing Surachi's condition, Mila Rose stepped in, delivering a firm punch to Haribel's shoulder. Haribel-sama, stop! Why are you lashing out on Surachi? Haribel snapped out of her daze. Faced with a straightforward question, she couldn't help but ponder. The thought of Kazuya addressing someone else as mommy made her blood boil, as if she had unconsciously taken Kazuya as her son. I can't use Kazuya like that. It was incredibly selfish to project her desires on him, even if acting like his mother satisfied her ego. Haribel-sama? I don't like Kazuya calling someone mommy, Haribel confessed in a low voice. It's so dumb, I know. Mila Rose crossed her arms, leveling a penetrating gaze at Haribel. You aren't his mother, Haribel-sama. Why are you jealous? Because, explaining the situation like this was sending unexpected stabs of embarrassment and contempt right through her and out the other side. She shuffled her feet and sat cross-legged, the tail attached to the back of her head waving with her, as if putting her embarrassment on full display. It doesn't matter, we're leaving. We're going far away from here. What? Why? Apache asked. Kazuya will return soon. How will he find us if leave? Are you thinking about abandoning Kazuya? Mila Rose widened her eyes. Skull went to Living World to find a safe place for us. It doesn't make sense to leave him behind. Sung-san also looked a little surprised. Haribel-sama, please tell me we are not leaving to throw off Kazuya. Haribel couldn't help but feel surprised by the resistance from everyone. It seemed like she wasn't the only one who created a deep bond with Kazuya in the past month. Nobody is leaving Kazuya. We're simply changing our base to keep Barragan from tracking us, Haribel said as she embraced the egg. Kazuya is a Vasto Lord and an Arankar. He can sense his Zanpakuto-s Ryatsu from far away. Haribel's explanation quenched their worries for the time being. Meanwhile, Surachi relentlessly stared at Haribel, realizing Haribel's decision and how her own answer changed the said decision. She was thinking about leaving him, so he can be happy on the other side. Haribel could sacrifice her life to save others, but she couldn't bear to see Kazuya waste away his life in Hueco Mundo when he could be a perfectly normal human in Living World. Haribel turned to Surachi and lowered her head. I acted out of line before. I showed disgraceful behavior as a leader. It's nothing. I understand you are conflicted about that mommy matter. She waved her hand and faced Mila Rose, smiling a little. Out of all four, she had the most respect for Mila Rose, and it only increased after Mila Rose protected her from Haribel. Thanks for helping me. Mila Rose chuckled. Ah, you're being too polite. We're all a family here. Covering each other's backs is what we should do. Apache nudged Sung-san with her horn. Did she forget Surachi recently tried to kill us? It's Mila Rose. Don't expect complex emotions from her thick skull. Chapter 39, The Maid. Kazuya abandoned the car with servants, opting instead for the sleek, midnight black vehicle that belonged to Izumi. He slid into the leather seat beside the driver's, waiting for Izumi to get over her reflection. After a couple of minutes, Izumi opened the door and gave him an unamused look. I told you to go with them. I have some questions, One-chan. Can you answer them while driving? A spark of delight flickered in her eyes. She would have ejected him from the car with merciless force had he dared to call her Oba-san. Instead, he called her One-chan, a far cry from the dreaded Oba-san title given upon her by the demonic children of her neighborhood. After all, she and Kazuya looked the same age, or so she liked to believe. I can. She sighed and assumed the driver's seat. I'm Izumi Ishida. What's your name? The name Ishida stirred a torrent of memories, leaving him momentarily stunned. Ah, of course. It's Yuryu's relatives. She has to be his grandmother or someone close to that level. He never fathomed encountering Yuryu Ishida's grandmother in her prime or that she would bear a striking resemblance to his past lover. The last he recalled of her from the flashbacks, she was a typical housewife, venting her frustrations upon Ichigo's mother, Masaki. She appeared more composed and restrained than her future self. Well, she was also naive for accepting his words at face value rather than probing his background. He lacked an identification card in his pocket to validate his name. There was no way for him to prove the rest of his story. Yet, she didn't entertain the possibility that he could be a fraud. Perhaps his persuasion skill clouded her rational thinking. I'm Kazuya, he replied, motioning for her to pause. Put on your seatbelt, One-chan. For safety. Izumi's hands on the steering froze as she turned to assess his innocent face. It's unnecessary, for me at least. Having slayed hollows for years, she viewed a car accident as a trifling concern. Save for the injury inflicted by a formidable hollow, she had gone unscathed in her 5 years of hollow-killing career. The car roared to life, its powerful purr resonating throughout the cabin. A hush enveloped them as she maintained unwavering focus on the road, her intense expression an uncanny echo of his past lover. Yumi and Izumi, even their names rhymed. What a sick joke. He shrugged, his gaze drifting forward. Even if they looked similar, Izumi was not the person he had once loved. No good would come out of chasing Yumi's shadow in Izumi. Hey, One-chan. How did you receive that injury? It's a big story. I don't want to talk about it right now. Oh. I'll bother you another time then. Okay. You'll be staying at Ishida's house as a guest. We'll test something and teach you facts about the spiritual worlds. Hang in tight. Her words implied she would provide him a place to stay and food, and instruct him on the ways to harness the powers that qualify a human as a Quincy. Though he lacked Quincy blood in his veins, he possessed the cheat-like prowess of his system. The inclusion of Quincy in his evolution paths signified his potential to acquire their abilities. There wasn't any harm even if he failed her test. Quincy, so that's how you pronounce it. She couldn't suppress a smile. Becoming a Quincy, I believe your mother wanted it to happen. Otherwise, she wouldn't have sent you here. Me too. I'll try my best, One-chan. She turned to him for a brief moment. Your hair makes you look like a ruffian. I like them big, One-chan, he spoke while glancing at her chest, but she was too absorbed in the front view to notice his gaze. One-san, what about you? She rolled her eyes. Size is just a matter of perspective. I have taken down some giant ones with my hands. He was talking about tits while she spoke of her hollow slaying experience. A mere 30 minutes later, Kazuya found himself sprawled on a bed within a plain room meant for a single person. This guest room was his domain until Izumi decided otherwise. He noticed that, aside from the two Jimish, the family seemed to comprise only Izumi. However, a photo of a middle-aged man in the living room and the ring adorning Izumi's finger hinted at the existence of a spouse. This revelation snuffed out any intentions of seducing Izumi into an affair, as he had no desire to wreak havoc on her marriage life for a few nights of pleasure. I hope I have some dreams today. In Hueco Mundo, he had consistently awoken with a hollow sensation, leading him to theorize that hollows lack the ability to dream. Wani-chan, get ready to be shocked out of your mind tomorrow. A playful grin appeared on his face as he eagerly awaited shattering some expectations tomorrow and getting a good laugh out of it. That night, for the first time in a month, Kazuya found himself enveloped in the embrace of a dream. The dream was shrouded in mist, echoes of past memories from his slumbering mind. The dream painted a picture of him navigating an ordinary day, traversing the hallowed halls of his university, only to later mess around with his alluring teacher-turned-lover. He could recall every electrifying sensation of her body, the intimate connection they shared pulsing through his memory, until the dream world was abruptly torn away, yanking him back to the cold grasp of reality. Blinking open his eyes, Kazuya found a maid standing attentively by his bedside. Black locks cascaded over her forehead, framing her face, while a neat braided ponytail rested on her shoulder. The bespectacled maid gazed at him, her eyes devoid of any discernible emotion. Izumi stood beside the maid, her expression filled with concern for him. As he sat up and rubbed his head, he felt a bit shaken by the dream, but it was nothing he couldn't handle. It's creepy to watch me sleep, Wani-chan and Mei-chan. Izumi folded her arms over her chest. Your Ryatsu was hectic when you were dreaming. We came to check up on you. He almost terrified her with his rampaging Ryatsu, a byproduct of his violent emotions from his dream. If he had continued to unleash his Ryatsu, she might have lost her house. The incident also revealed a glimpse of his true potential, making her realize that the random Quincy she found on the streets possessed a freak-level Ryatsu. He is no weakling, Izumi-sama, the maid commented. Are you sure he is a gemished? He has a captain, a great capacity for Ryoryoku. Even if it was for a mere moment, she had felt his Ryatsu peaking at somewhere around grade level, aka Ryatsu rivaling a Gotei 13 captain. Kazuya didn't miss the maid's small error in comparing his Ryatsu to a captain class. Did you just stutter? The maid shook her head. You are still sleepy. Lisa, prepare a bath for Kazuya, Izumi instructed before turning to Kazuya with a small smile and a polite nod. I'll be waiting in the dining room. Her attitude shifted dramatically after witnessing his potential. She went from treating him like a kid to treating him like an honorable guest. Chapter 40, The Meeting of Old Comrades. Sometime earlier, a lanky blonde man in a blazing orange shirt and obsidian black trousers swaggered down the street, one hand nonchalantly buried in his pocket, while the other effortlessly balanced a plain katana on his shoulder. Strutting by his side was a short woman cloaked in a red jogging suit over a white shirt. Her short, golden hair, styled into spiky pigtails, was tamed by ruby-red clips that matched her fiery temper. The katana strapped to her back and the one held by the blonde man seemed completely out of place on the streets of Karakura town. Her freckled face twisted in disgust. Shinji, I'm pissed. Remind me of one time you weren't pissed. It's different this time, she groaned. This hollow smell. It makes my stomach turn. I want to stab these mother. In a swift motion, Shinji's hand covered Hiyori's mouth, silencing her before she could curse. He flashed a grin at the elementary school students innocently passing by, making them flee for their lives. Don't curse in front of the young ones. Hiyori retaliated with a vicious kick to Shinji's shin, causing him to stumble. You better hope Urahara has answers for this, or I'll make you wish you were dead. What the hell does it have to do with me, Snaggletooth? Hiyori's leg shot up again, her foot connecting with Shinji's side and sending him crashing into a wall. Their supernatural resilience ensured that such impacts left no mark on them. Snaggletooth. Their relentless bickering continued, akin to siblings locked in a never-ending feud, until they reached a deceptively ordinary-looking establishment, Urahara Shop. Kisuke Urahara had opened this unassuming storefront as a cover for his shady activities, selling wares from the Soul Society to Shinigami stationed in the living world for missions. The ever-so-violent Hiyori raised her leg with a pissed face. However, the sliding door opened just in time, and Kasuke elegantly sidestepped her incoming kick. I was expecting your visit, Hiyori-san and Shinji-san. TCH. Hiyori venomously spat on the side and walked past Urahara, welcoming herself as if she was entering a friend's house. Shinji waved at Urahara, his friendly smile coming off as sinister because of his upper teeth. Moments later, they all sat around a low table, now joined by Tessai, Kasuke's childhood friend and assistant in Urahara's shop. Hiyori's face remained a scowl of irritation from Kasuke's teasing. With a resounding clap, Shinji seized the attention of both. What was that last night, Urahara? What happened to those hollows? Kasuke took out a stack of papers from his sleeve and lazily tossed them on the table before he lay on the floor, leaning his head using elbow. From another sleeve, he pulled out a paper fan and smugly fanned himself. Go on, read them. Shinji, who was used to Kasuke's antics, grabbed the reports and read through them. We have sensed a Garganta opening in western Karakura town near the shopping district, Shinji said, eyes scanning the paper. He flipped to the second report. 12th Company arrived at the scene 10 minutes after the incident and found nothing in their search. Get to the point. Hiyori snarled. Shinji frowned and flipped to the last page. Investigation results based on our observations of the scene, 2 powerful hollows emerged from Garganta. Judging from their dual-natured Ryatsu, we have concluded that they are Arrancar. One of them has spirit class between rank 4 and rank 5 and the other one. Shinji widened his eyes as he looked at Kasuke, Hiyori, and Tessai. The Soul Society determined one's density of Ryatsu through a ranking called Spirit Class. Spirit Class rank 1 was the highest density while rank 20 was the lowest one could have. Rank 4 and 5 belonged to vice captains of a squad. Spit it out, Hiyori snarled, impatient. Spirit Class between rank 2 and 3, which equals Captain Class. What? Hiyori slammed the table, her voice filled with disbelief. A Vasto Lord Arrancar in Karakura town? Are you fucking kidding with me? She was barely close to rank 5 after augmenting herself with her hollow mask. The Arrancar in question could outright kill a Captain-class Shinigami, even giving a hard time to the senior captains. Urahara playfully waved his fan at Hiyori's face. Cool down, Hiyori-san. Take these reports with a grain of salt. It's impossible to accurately measure someone's spirit class from their Ryatsu imprints. They could be an Ajucha's Arrancar with exceptionally gifted Ryatsu and an innate ability that boosts their Ryatsu like your hollow mask. Don't jump to conclusions. Shinji tossed the reports back on the table. Okay, then what should we do? He was the leader of the Visored, and Karakura town was their new home after they built an underground training space with Kasuke's help. A Vasto Lord would absolutely bring massive attention to the place, increasing their chances of being discovered by Soul Society. Nothing for now. Kasuke shook his head. The Arrancars retreated to Garganta within minutes as though they came here by mistake. Shinji frowned. They came and returned just like that? Nah, you think he is behind these Arrancars? Kasuke looked at Shinji, eyes glowing with mischief. He who betrayed his captain, the madman we shan't name at any cost. Yeah, it could be him trying to probe Karakura town security, or he is using this as a bait for your group. Shinji's face darkened when Kasuke mentioned Aizen's betrayal. Nothing will come out of guessing stars here. Hiyori got up from her seat. Shinji, let this guy deal with this mess. He can take down a Vasto Lord or 2 by himself. The Visored were labeled hollows by the Soul Society standards, even if they once held respectable positions within Gotei 13. There was also the threat of Aizen, who might still be searching for them. Making communication with Kasuke wasn't a good move, but the emergency last night forced them to seek his assistance. You overestimate my abilities, Hiyori-san. Kasuke tipped his down hat with his cane, his lips forming a sly grin. The hollow is unknown with inexplicable abilities. While I am your lowly but handsome merchant. Yeah, Kasuke can deal with them. Shinji laughed as he gulped down the cold drink. By the way, Urahara. How long will Lisa play around in that maid costume? I am not complaining since she looks pretty in there, but I don't like her being alone at times like these. Urahara Kasuke stroked his stubble thoughtfully. Her job is technically done. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the room shifted as everyone froze in place. Their Ryuraku, spiritual sense, detected an immense Ryatsu presence. Though it lasted only a brief second, the powerful souls and keen senses of everyone present picked up on it. After all, even the weakest among them, Hiyori, once held a vice-captain position in the Soul Society. Another captain level? Hiyori muttered in shock. Are people with grade-level Ryuryoku growing on trees now, huh? Shinji crossed his arms. This one is human. Kasuke rarely forgot an individual's Ryatsu, especially the ones he found intriguing. He had sensed this same Ryatsu last night. Chuckling, he spread the fan to its full length and covered his face. The guy who pisses from his roof. His instincts about that man were right. He was no ordinary individual. In fact, Kasuke believed his presence near the Garganta opening wasn't just a coincidence. If you guys aren't buying anything, leave. I have more important matters than entertaining customers who won't buy even one item. Chapter 41-42, Quincy Lessons. The moment Izumi departed, Kazuya's gaze was drawn to the maid known as Lisa. Her calm, almost cold beauty effortlessly showcased the innate elegance and charm of her frilled maid dress. However, her Ryatsu proved to be disappointingly below an average human. Wait a minute. A black-haired girl with glasses named Lisa. A flicker of recognition ignited, as memories of a powerful group hiding in Karakura town surfaced. If his recollection was accurate, Lisa was one of the Visored, a small group of Shinigami who could don hollow masks to augment their powers. Her involvement with Quincy matters certainly piqued his interest. Lisa adjusted her glasses, the lenses momentarily gleaming. Do you prefer cold water or hot water? Cold or hot, she repeated in a cold voice. I don't have time, guess Dono. Shake your head if you prefer to bathe in cold water. Nod if you believe a hot water bath is better. With a cheeky smile, he responded, You rekindled my love for cold things. Lisa was momentarily disarmed by the soothing nature of his voice. It was as if it held a mystical power, one she had never encountered during her time in Soul Society. Cold water it is then. Clearly, the superior choice. Lisa departed to prepare his bath. To kill some time, he rose from the bed and stretched his muscles before getting down to do some push-ups. As he worked his body, he reflected on what just transpired. Lisa and Izumi. His dream had all but exposed the full extent of his Ryuryoku. Fortunately, Izumi refrained from prying further, attributing the surge in his Ryatsu to his dream. Only because she could not detect the true depth of his Ryatsu, as her Ryuryoku level matched that of a seated officer in the Soul Society. The vast difference didn't allow her to properly feel his strength. Then again, a Quincy's might was not measured by their Ryuryoku level, but rather their ability to gather Reisha from their surroundings and forge spirit weapons. In stark contrast, Lisa must have recognized his Ryuryoku level, being a former vice-captain of the squad led by Shunchue Kairaku. As both Shinigami and Hollow were mere souls, Lisa evidently depended on a Jigai to assume a physical form and conceal her Ryatsu. Urahara must be behind her Jigai. On second thought, I can make some use of her. He could use her to approach Kasuke Urahara. As a master inventor, Urahara undoubtedly possessed items capable of concealing a Hollow's Ryatsu, which would enable his companions to live in a living world without worrying about Shinigami. Lisa's appearance was a blessing in disguise. Or I can move to some island that's outside of Soul Society's jurisdictions. He was conflicted between the two choices, one allowed more fun with his group and a clear path in acquiring Hogyoku from Kasuke. The other choice led to more relaxed days for his group and far less risky. I can't keep avoiding risks. Mila Rose risked her life to protect him, Harabelle was ready to sacrifice her life to save them, and Apache almost died protecting something that belonged to him. Some Sun had yet to demonstrate her loyalty, but she would undoubtedly go to great lengths for him. It would only be fair to take some risks to secure an Arrancar power-up for them. A power-up they would undoubtedly need in taking down Barragan once and for all. Hogyoku will be mine. He came to find shelter for his allies and ended up vying for the most powerful item in this world. Laughing at the absurdity, he got up and looked out of the window. The ludicrous situation reminded him of a certain quote from his world. The things you are passionate about are not random, they are your calling. Following a long bath and a healthy breakfast, Kazuya was brought to a realm with rows of towering bookshelves, a library. A wealth of knowledge lay within arm's reach, beckoning him to delve in and explore its contents. He feigned an exhausted groan. It's my nightmare come to life. Lisa, who was standing by his side, shot him a mild look of disdain. Unappreciative of literature. You must have been the least liked student of your teachers. Quite the opposite. My teacher used to love me. It was true love, beyond the bond of a teacher and a student. It must have been for reasons other than your grades. I doubt you were good at studying. Mei-chan, never judge a book by its cover. Open it up and read first, he said, glancing at her with immeasurable disappointment. My sensei used to praise my tongue, saying there is something magical about it. I always ace the oral tests. Lisa arched a brow, her expression remaining deadpan. She flipped the book in her hand. There is something wrong with you, Gestano. Literature isn't about acing exams or becoming proficient with a language. A book is a dream that you hold in your hand. It has the power to transport you to other worlds, it can introduce you to characters and new perspectives, and immerse you in tales that can carve your heart with blazing emotions. The intricate analogy showed her deep passion for books. He felt like she would write a whole-ass essay on the magic of literature if she was allowed. Hey, are you allowed to say that while holding a young adult romance novel? I'm pretty sure it's a novel of that variety. Manga, novel or erotica, they are all part of literature, Gestano, Lisa muttered as she walked over to the table and busied herself in the pages of a cultured novel. Izumi couldn't help but smile. Kazuya's presence made things a tad livelier in her otherwise quiet house. She patted his shoulder. Lisa is right, Kazuya. There is something wrong with all of us here. We might seem normal on the surface, but this is just a facade. Say, Kazuya, have you ever come across a hollow, a monster wearing a white, bone-like mask? He lightly shook his head, keeping up his naive persona. I haven't. Your spiritual awakening is recent, or you were incredibly lucky to never attract a hollow, Izumi said as she ran her finger along the spines of countless books, wandering past row after row of towering shelves. Cast aside your normal laws and beliefs and open up your mind. Allow me to introduce you to a new, terrifying reality lurking beneath our common world. That sounds scary, right? Izumi spun around, offering him a comforting smile. But it won't be that hard for someone with your talent. Believe in me who believes in you. I didn't mean to say scary. He paused as his lips curved up. It sounds exciting, One-chan. It's every man's dream to smash giant monsters with their bare fists. His excited grin put a pause on Izumi before she chuckled softly. I wish every Quincy had your enthusiasm. I promise that you'll never find another like me. Really, there was only one hollow capable of completely twisting its roots and changing races. One other could be born if they wished for it upon Hogyoku. Imagine I am born from some organ of Soul King. The absurd thought drew a chuckle from him. Indeed, Lisa chimed in, her focus never lifting from her novel. Quincy with monster-level Ryatsu are a rare breed in today's world. From Lisa's perspective, if Kazuya succeeded in manifesting his Quincy powers, he'd become a prime target for the Soul Society's scrutiny. The Soul Society simply wouldn't allow him to roam freely and decimate hollows, which would destabilize the balance between the three worlds. As a spy, she also couldn't go against Izumi's decision in recruiting Kazuya into her clan. He let Lisa's words slide in one ear and out the other before placing his hands on Izumi's shoulders, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. Wani-chan, tell me. Do we fight hollows with bare hands? He was referring to blood, the ability most Sternritters showed in the 1,000-year Blood War. The technique allowed Quincy to significantly enhance their defensive power or offensive power, the only drawback being that they used the defensive and offensive powers at the same time. As a brawler, he could certainly make use of the blood ability. Izumi blinked in surprise. As a pure-blood Quincy, she could certainly use blood vein and blood artery. We might have spiritual powers, but our body is still that of a human. Fighting hollows with bare hands is impossible with our Quincy techniques. We rely on these. She swiftly grabbed a silver Quincy cross pendant from around her neck and held it out in front of her. A radiant blue light enveloped her hand, pulling the surrounding rapier as if it was a magnet. In the next instant, a magnificent spirit bow materialized. Ha! She took a deep breath, steadying herself as she drew the bowstring back. Blue arrows of rapier energy formed in the ethereal bow. These arrows can slay hollows, monstrous souls filled with vengeance, who eagerly devour other souls without discrimination. Kazuya clapped as if appreciating her performance. Magnificent, Wani-chan. You are so cool. Swept by his appreciation, she nodded with her chest high. Feeling Lisa's intense gaze, she coughed and dematerialized the spirit bow. My apologies. His naive admiration brought out a wholly new side out of Izumi that only Lisa knew. Kazuya, the bow is the most important technique for a Quincy in battle. I'll be teaching you that first, then we'll go over some basic theories. Wani-chan, he replied. He never had a sibling, but addressing Izumi like this was a completely new experience for him. He didn't mind being spoiled like this. So where do I start? Izumi crossed her arms. The bow I used is made up by combining the ambient rapier with my Ryuryoku. Lisa facepalmed at the stupidity of her employer. Izumi-sama, he is oblivious to the terms you're throwing around. Oh, Izumi frowned. How do I explain them without overwhelming him? Lisa placed her book aside and left the room. Moments later, she returned with a whiteboard and a pen. She drew 2 identical humanoid figures and labeled them human, Kishi, and soul, Kanpaku. Your drawing is sick. Lisa ignored his sarcastic comments on her basic level drawing. Listen carefully. Humans, like you and Izumi-sama, are physical beings. They live in the world of the living and are made up of Kishi, or matter, like everything else here. The bodies of Kishi can interact with each other, but they can't see or touch souls unless they are spiritually aware like you recently became. Are you following me so far? I am, Maid-sensei. What is a soul then? In simple words, we call them spiritual bodies made up of rapier. The samurai you saw were souls. Then, there's rapier, or spirit particles. They're the smallest units that make up souls and all spiritual matter, similar to atoms in your world. In spiritual planes like Soul Society and Hueco Mundo, the concentration of rapier is higher than in the world of the living. He had a shallow comprehension of spiritual concepts since he was born as a hollow. These formal lessons gave him a deeper insight into the spiritual concepts. HM. Lisa looked over her shoulder to see his fully concentrated expression and pointed at the soul figure. Moving on, Ryuryoku is the amount of spiritual energy a being has. Think of it as your spiritual muscles. The stronger your Ryuryoku, the more power you can have as a spiritual being. And finally, Ryatsu is the pressure that your Ryuryoku exerts. It's like your spiritual signature. The stronger your Ryatsu, the more powerful and intimidating you appear to other spiritual beings. Ah. Wani-chan said I have a high level of Ryuryoku. Does that automatically make me an elite warrior to other souls? Lisa shook her head. Ryatsu only reflects the Ryuryoku you can consciously use. Don't worry about it. Izumi-sama will teach you how to utilize your Ryuryoku first. Kazuya took a deep breath. All right. So, humans are made of matter, souls are made of spirit particles, Ryoryoku is spiritual power, and Ryatsu is the pressure that spiritual power exerts. Did I get it right? Izumi smiled at his quick learning. We'll start the Ryoryoku and Reisha gathering lessons within a force field. Lisa, do you want to come? Typically, any location would suffice for Ryoryoku training, but Kazuya's vast Ryoryoku complicated things. His immense spiritual energy would undoubtedly attract a slew of hollows, requiring them to use the force fields to hide his spiritual presence. Izumi-sama, you'll have to forgive me. I have to prepare lunch. We will order something. Lisa, you have no more excuses. Checkmate, huh? Lisa sighed. Lead the way, madam. From their interactions it was clear Izumi held a great deal of trust in Lisa, unaware of her true identity as a former Vice Captain Shinigami. Unlike her husband, she bore no love for Shinigami. Lisa was playing with Izumi's feelings, just like he was playing with theirs. Chapter 43, Reisha Manipulation. Izumi took Kazuya to a secluded Quincy training ground in Karakura Town, an unassuming warehouse, empty on the inside. Izumi set up a force field using a specialized Quincy technique and began instructing him on the control of Ryoryoku. Kazuya didn't toy with Izumi this time and demonstrated results after only a few moments of fake struggle. However, he took great care to limit his Ryatsu to several levels below his peak, not wishing to frighten them with his grade-level Ryoryoku. They both showed a look of brief surprise, a priceless reaction, before Izumi began teaching him the crucial part that allowed Quincy to use their abilities. The gathering of Reisha. Kazuya was already familiar with Reisha manipulation from his month-long training with Haribel. However, Quincy abilities demanded incredibly precise control over large quantities of Reisha, a skill he had yet to acquire. It shouldn't be that hard. Taking a deep breath, he closed his eyes. The thudding of his heartbeat drowned out all other sounds as he entered a state of deep concentration, the very state that had allowed him to discern so much about hollows in Hueco Mundo. He referred to this state as cultivator mode. Blue spirit particles materialized within the room, each vibrating molecule gravitating towards Kazuya. He took command of them, molding them into the shape of a typical bow. A faint, spectral silhouette of a bow began to manifest, only to crumble into non-existence at the last moment. Racial ability, Reisha manipulation unlocked. Current mastery level, basic. Kazuya's brow furrowed, feeling a strange sense of resistance from the Reisha around him. Undeterred, he made repeated attempts, each one giving the bow to a more distinct look. Izumi watched, torn between interrupting his efforts and the desire to see him succeed. Every Quincy needed a cross to manifest their spirit weapon, yet Kazuya seemed resolved to defy this tradition. Eventually, his perseverance bore fruit as a grand spirit bow, matching his height, took form. He drew back the invisible bowstring, and a ridiculously massive arrow materialized. At last. I was starting to doubt myself there. A shared glance passed between Lisa and Izumi. The reality of Kazuya's monstrous potential was sinking in. Izumi knew of no one who could conjure a spirit bow without a Quincy cross, let alone on the first day of their training. It sparked a glimmer of hope in her that he could usher in a new era for their fading Quincy race. Lisa, however, eyed him skeptically. Guess Dono, are you certain this is your first try? She focused her senses on his Ryatsu, feeling any fluctuation that could tell her that he was lying. Caught off guard by the suspicion in her gaze, Kazuya tilted his head. Absolutely. One-chan, you mentioned that hollows are big monsters. I shall shoot them down with my divine bow, Gondiva. I will call it that after I improve my marksmanship. In Hueco Mundo, he was waiting for his Zanpakuto before deciding on his main weapon. Then the egg showed up in the place of his Zanpakuto, leaving him befuddled. With Reisha manipulation, he could try practicing with any weapon. They won't be as effective as Zanpakuto, but they were better than nothing. Plus, there was the potential of crafting more powerful weapons as his mastery over Reisha improved. Finding no trace of a lie in his words, Lisa discarded her suspicions of Kazuya being a spy like herself. She could discern no motive for Kazuya to deceive a Quincy of Izumi's stature, and he shouldn't have any knowledge of her hidden identity. I am being overly cautious. Aizen's betrayal had filled everyone in their group with trust issues. The seemingly gentle vice captain had wrapped the entire Suriidii in his fingers, and they could do nothing but hide in the living world, waiting for a day they could become powerful enough to destroy him. Gesdano, your bow is an overkill, Lisa said, observing his bow with a frown. Keep in mind that manipulating Raisher drains stamina. Anything bigger than a standard bow is a waste of energy. His response was a teasing wink. I have infinite stamina, Maid-chan. Come to my bedroom if you want proof. Please don't try to seduce me, Lisa whispered, adjusting her glasses. I'm not interested in one-night stands. He dispersed the bow and feigned a hurt look. I'm sad that you think of me as a playboy. Have you given me enough reasons to not assume you are not? I haven't. Your bias still hurts me. Izumi's lips curled into a gentle smile. Don't take it personally, Otuo-kun. Lisa's rather complex. Her passion is more in books than the world around her. If Lisa wasn't acting as a spy, she would have openly argued against Izumi. Alas, her current role prohibited from making snarky comments on Izumi's husband. Wani-chan, some people are like ice cubes, they have no flavor, no heat, and no substance. The corners of Lisa's mouth twitched. He implied she was bland as hell, which was far from the truth. The world is a cold place, Gesdano. A candle like you can only provide so much warmth before the harsh gales snuffs you out. I'm not a candle, Maid-chan. I'm the whole damn sun. The wind can't approach me, much less snuff out my radiance. Yeah, right. Kazuya formed a lance with Raisher. How effective is it against those hollows? He had to ask Izumi since he couldn't use the weapon in this place. Lest he ended up destroying the entire warehouse by accident. Not as effective as a bow, Lisa said. And useless against a decent Zanpakuto wrapped in seated officer's Ryatsu. I have to admit, your ability to manipulate Raisher is out of this world. I am also out of this world. Lisa shrugged. Okay. He continued honing his Raisher manipulation skills until it was time for lunch. Despite his efforts, the system remained silent, no notification about unlocking or acquiring a new race. It seemed that merely learning a single Quincy technique didn't warrant him the title of Quincy in the eyes of the system. Do I have to learn all Quincy abilities? Even with his talent, learning all the abilities would take quite some time. Otuo-kun, before we go to lunch, I need to tell you more about our world. Izumi relayed surface-level information on the three realms, Soul Society, Hueco Mundo, Living World, and their intricate dynamic that hung upon the balancing of souls. Soul-eating monsters in twisted masks, a group of old-fashioned samurai purifying those monsters with unique weapons known as Zanpakuto, and us. That's all the major factions you need to be aware of, though we are not big anymore ever since the Quincy incident 150 years ago. She didn't sugarcoat the story and revealed the fall of Quincy. Somehow she found it appropriate to share this with Kazuya, whom she was supposed to recruit into her clan. Maybe she had blind faith that he wouldn't get scared after hearing about a genocide. I can't judge the incident from listening to one side. Kazuya turned to Izumi, looking into her cloudy eyes. However, the Quincy faction feels like the real villain. They should have listened to the Soul Society's appeals about the cycle of souls. Izumi let out a weary sigh. As much as I despise those words, they are the bitter truth. Our ancestors committed grave sins. The Shinigami are also unjust for wiping out thousands. Yeah, Izumi nodded. To make up for those mistakes, my husband Soken wants to create a new system where we keep hollows at bay and protect citizens until Shinigami arrives and purifies them with their Zanpakuto. It will preserve the balance and keep casualties to minimum. Kazuya frowned. That's a pretty clever way of maintaining the balance. Where's your husband though? He is out, training. Izumi leaned her butt against the table, gripping the table with her knuckles. I'll give you some time to decide your future, whether you want to stay here or leave." She was leaving the choice up to him, a pretty odd move considering the importance she attached to his talent. Lisa sighed at Izumi's stupidity. Izumi could have saved the Quincy Falls details for later. But no, Izumi had to be a stuck-up noblewoman and make Kazuya wary. She approached Kazuya. "Guess Dano, the thing happened 150 years ago, circumstances were different back then. What happened was tragic, a bloodshed that could have been prevented with some effort." Alas, she trailed off with another sigh, recalling the events from her childhood. "I can assure you that it won't happen again as long as the souls maintain a balance across 3 worlds." Helping Lisa convince Kazuya wasn't part of her job, but she didn't want to see Izumi go back to her lonely self. After all, her job here could come to an end any moment. Kazuya gave a nonchalant shrug. "I understand. Wani-chan, I'm staying." Izumi's face brightened before she coughed. "Welcome to Ishida clan. Will not disappoint you. I'll train my ass off to stop hollows. In return, you'll be paying for all of my expenses." He wouldn't need to worry about money as long as he stayed in Karakura town and fought some hollows. Lisa's face twitched. "Do you see Izumi-sama as a cow cash?" From what she knew, Soken was wealthy, but Ishida family's expensive lifestyle was slowly chipping away at his wealth. Kazuya might turn out to be the camel that breaks the back for the Ishida clan. "I mean, I'll be risking my life fighting hollows. Gratitude won't fill my stomach." "Otuo-kun's argument is valid, Lisa," Izumi said in a calm voice. "I'll happily pay for it if it's within reason. Let's celebrate this with something spicy." Chapter 44, Longing. Haribel and her crew moved across the stark white desert, the group of 5 lost in the endless expanse. They kept their Ryatsu hidden, so their tracks remained concealed. This led them to get attacked by weaker hollow, but Mila Rose's Zanpakuto made quick work of them. The dead hollows became easy food for Apache in her conquest to become a Vasto Lord. Haribel observed Apache devour the hollow flesh with a stoic gaze. Sung Sun had also grown an appetite, but it was nothing compared to Apache. As much as she despised the sacrifices, she could empathize with Apache's hunger for power after that battle. She would be feeling the same if she lacked the power to protect Kazuya. "Anyone else missing Skull, or is it just me?" asked Mila Rose, swinging her sword casually. "It's been quiet without him." Apache and Srirachi always stayed in their minds, only speaking when someone asked them something. Haribel rarely spoke. Sung Sun and Mila Rose were the only ones who found things to talk about. It was like the old times before Kazuya and Apache joined them. "There's just so much I can talk about, Rose," Sung Sun responded solemnly. "If I'm being honest, this silence bites me. It's like he took a part of our souls with him." "You are being overly dramatic." "You caught me red-handed," Sung Sun said with a giggle. "It wasn't completely a lie. He took a part of Apache's soul and a small part of mine." A destructive Siro whizzed past Sung Sun. Apache cleaned herself with a blast of Ryatsu and glared at Sung Sun. "Stop talking behind my back. It makes you look miserable." "Era, I'll say it to your face then. Kazuya is having fun out there, and you are stuck here, eating souls for a chance at becoming Vasto Lord. How does it make you feel? Did you forget what he said before leaving? His goal is to find a safe place for us." Apache didn't fall for Sung Sun's blatant attempt to get inside of her head. Sung Sun narrowed her eyes. "I believe he had more than enough time to find shelter for us. He only had to travel to a deep forest where Shinigami wouldn't bother going. What is taking him so long? I wonder." Apache's eyes widened, a flare of emotion breaking through her courageous demeanor. "You're just pulling my leg. Kazuya won't betray us. I know him better than you. Unfortunately, all the signs point to his betrayal." "Fuck off." "Accept the bitter truth and the sadness that comes with betrayal, Apache. It's what we deserve for putting our trust in a shifting chameleon." The glint of amusement in Sung Sun's eyes was visible to everyone except Apache. The very notion of Kazuya's betrayal made her hopeless. She had been in tatters since Kazuya left, so much so that a few words from Sung-sun exposed her fragile state. Surachi couldn't help but wonder if Cyan Sung-sun was her sister before they became hollows. They both shared a passion for tormenting others. She preferred physical pain while Sung-sun excelled in inflicting emotional pain. Is it fate? Nobody paid her any attention. That's enough, Sung-sun. Harabelle approached Apache and patted her back with her sword arm. You have a mind of your own. Don't let others cast doubt on your heart. Who the hell would believe in Sung-sun of all people? Apache huffed and stomped ahead of them. I'll leave you all behind one day, stupid women. Mila Rose's smile vanished. That was a little too intense for a joke, Sung-sun. Surachi cast a look of disapproval at Mila Rose. It was a perfect trap to make her suffer. An amusing display. You give me too much credit, Surachi. Sung-sun shook her head. I did it to switch her focus. She will busy her mind in finding insults for me, instead of missing Kazuya. She needed something like that. Harabelle narrowed her eyes at Apache's back. Longing can strengthen resolve. They will need every bit of resolve to come out unscathed against the God King of Hueco Mundo. The court of Las Noches lay in a deathly silence. Not a single hollow, regardless of their stature or might, dared to utter a word. The formidable Ryatsu of their ancient sovereign hung heavy in the air like a suffocating shroud, despite it not being directed at them. Barragan's skeletal fingers drummed a rhythm on the armrest of his throne as he leaned his face into his palm. Worthless, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Surachi and Dordoni have done nothing but test my patience. Fetch me news of their whereabouts. As for the Vasto Lord, I'll handle them personally. He expected Tyr Harabelle and the new Vasto Lord to be a pain in the ass but not strong enough to take down two old Arankar. Surachi and Dordoni were two of the best warriors in his army, easily on par with Vasto Lord in their right. Their weeks-long silence could only mean one of two things: either they were outmatched and died, or they had turned traitor. Regardless of the situation, he couldn't rely on the remaining Espada's ability to handle two Vasto Lord. Sale was more engrossed in his bizarre experiments than in actual combat. Aranjero, despite his immense potential, was still in the early stages of evolution. Lowly and Minoli were only just on par with the Najuchas, their worth lying primarily in their roles as his mistresses. And finally, Gantenbane, Barragan's fanatic worshipper, was the only competent warrior among the Espada, apart from Sale. As the unchallenged God King of Hueco Mundo, Barragan hadn't invested much time in strengthening Espada. Lord Barragan going into the field. The blonde hollow standing behind him mumbled. May I be so fortunate as to accompany you, Lord Barragan? You may, Evania. Call upon Gantenbane as well. Evania pressed her hands against her masked face. I'll fetch him right away, Lord Barragan. Barragan clenched his scythe. He would be destroying a Vasto Lord after so long. He shook his head. You just had to be a rebel, Tyr Harabelle. He would have just warned Tyr Harabelle if she came to his court. For all his grace and mercy, she challenged his authority together with another Vasto Lord. Nobody who denied his authority would go unpunished. Chapter 45, Peeping Tom. Meanwhile, in the Ishida family mansion, Lisa lay sprawled on her bed, clad in nothing but a skimpy panty and bra. The swishing sound of the fan overhead provided a modicum of relief from the madness that had ensued in the recent days. Watching Kazuya perform more and more Quincy techniques with ease took a great toll on her sanity, and she wasn't even a Quincy. Just 4 days, she muttered to herself, ruminating on the staggering speed of Kazuya's progress. He had quickly mastered the art of creating multiple spirit weapons and incorporating them into battle, and had even taken the first step towards mastering Harankyaku, Quincy's equivalent of Shinigami Shuinpa and Hollow Sonido. His strength had grown to the point her inner hollow growled every time she saw him, warning her of the threat he posed, and showing excitement to engage in a battle with him. One slip of control would expose her secret to Izumi, the last thing she wanted to do as a spy. I'll have to train extra hard when I return. ZZZZZT. A strange sound jolted her out of thoughts. A crimson beam sliced through the wall like butter, revealing the grinning face of the narcissist merchant. Hola. Urahara? Lisa exclaimed, sitting bolt upright. Hi. It's me, your beloved merchant of Karakura Town. I know who you are, stupid. What are you doing here? If someone saw you... You don't have to worry about the consequences, Yadamaru-san, Kazuya cut in with a chuckle. You are dismissed from your duties as a spy. You can leave. The sudden order left her reeling. She lowered her gaze, frowning at the thought of leaving Kazuya alone with Izumi. She was worried about Kazuya taking advantage of Izumi's kindness. She would regret it if something happened to Izumi behind her back. Kazuya jumped inside the room, a hand holding the top of his hat. Are you against leaving this place? My real place is with the Visored, she said. You know that better than me. You say that, yet you show reluctance in leaving. Has the new boy smitten you with his charm? Maybe you have fallen for your married master, turning into a forbidden romance. Shut the hell up. Lisa snorted. I'll leave in a couple of days. I have some unfinished business here. What you do from now on is none of my business now. Be aware, Yadamaru-san. Kazuya lowered his hat as he turned around. Hold on to things lightly, for the tighter the grip, the harder the fall. Lisa clenched her fists. Don't speak in riddles, jerkface. Haha, I'm off to meet the new guy. Wish me luck. Kazuya sat in deep meditation, dressed only in a pair of trousers. Traces of vibrant blue energy coursed through his exposed skin, a stark display of the rancor flowing within him. But in an instant, the pulsating lines dimmed, replaced by ominous purple marks snaking across his arms. The sheer agony of ruptured blood vessels forced him to clench his teeth. Fuck! His blood vessels had completely ruptured from exposure to high amounts of rancor, fatal injury to any ordinary human but nothing for him. Within a few seconds, the bruises vanished, healed completely by his regeneration. He had to go through so much to learn blood, yet any Quincy like Izumi could use it without any difficulty. Pain resistance mastery level improved to high. The agonizing training also contributed in improving the mastery of his pain resistance skills. He repeated the process for a few moments until the pain drained the last bit of his willpower. Afterwards, he sprawled on the bed, exhausted. Before he could find solace, a knock echoed through the room. He couldn't help groan from the familiar presence outside. Otudo-kun, can I come in? Yes. Izumi entered, delicately holding a tray adorned with 2 cups. She hobbled over to his bedside and placed the tray on the table. A cup of hojicha will cure your fatigue overnight. You should have just called me, Wani-chan. How will your leg heal if you keep abusing it like that? This is nothing, Kazuya, Izumi replied softly. Being of use to you brings me happiness. In the span of 4 days, Izumi's demeanor had undergone a remarkable transformation. Her care and sweetness seemed to have reached new heights, as if she had become an entirely different person. It wasn't an act forced to keep him here, she found genuine happiness in servicing him as if he was some kind of higher entity. Did he have some innate ability that turned older women into kind and compassionate towards him? His mind drifted as took sips of the sweet and aromatic green tea. Izumi nodded. Otudo-kun, I have a favor. A sense of déjà vu washed over Kazuya. Izumi's request reminded him of Haribel's unfinished request in Hueco Mundo, interrupted by Mino's nearly killing Apache. Tell me. I suggest you rest tomorrow and have fun outside. I don't want your body to wear down from constant training. The favor was strangely skewed to help him, as he had come to expect from her. As long as you send Lisa with me. He had gotten close to Lisa, but there was still a noticeable gap between them. One that would keep standing as long as she remained skeptical of his character. He was confident in knocking down those walls if given enough time and space. A day-long date would suffice. Izumi's eyes narrowed as she smirked. Make the most of it, Otudo-kun. I won't disappoint you, Wani-chan. Once Izumi left with the tray, Kazuya returned to resting on the bed. A worry for Haribel and others' safety crept into his mind whenever he wasn't preoccupied. They had survived in the treacherous Hueco Mundo for longer than his 2 lifetimes combined. Yet, he couldn't shake off the concern gnawing at him. Returning to them through the Garganta was out of the question, for it would surely alert those who kept a watchful eye on the town. The list most likely included Aizen. The voyeur was probably monitoring the town for Visored and Kasuke Urahara, but it shouldn't be his main focus until he gets to creating White and getting her mixed with Ichigo's mother, Masaki. Fuck this. I'll quickly check on them. It was time to bring out his trump card that should conceal Garganta's presence, a Quincy force field. After seeing Izumi create force fields for like 7 times, he could confidently create one without relying on any equipment. Since it could conceal his Ryatsu, it had to conceal the opening of a Garganta. I'll open far away from this town just in case. He took out his clothes and tossed them on the bed. As he reached for his shirt when an unsettling sensation prickled the back of his neck. A gaze bore into him, causing him to spin around, his eyes narrowing on a minuscule hole in the wall. The hole wasn't present before. You peeping Tom. Show yourself. Without missing a beat, Kasuke Urahara nonchalantly opened the window and made his entrance. The surprise etched across his face spoke volumes about Kazuya's ability to sense his presence. Ahem, I've been discovered peeping on men. My reputation will sink to the bottom. What should I do? Chapter 46, Divulge. Kazuya never expected to be visited by Kasuke Urahara of all people. Then again, Kasuke could have come seeking Lisa and stumbled upon him. Or maybe Kasuke detected an anomaly in him during their last interaction and had returned for further investigation. There could be a million reasons for Kasuke to be here. Slipping into his clothes, he looked at Kasuke. Your clothes are similar to traditional Japanese clothes. Are you a Shinigami? He chose an icy demeanor over his usual frivolous self. Being playful would lead him nowhere against Kasuke. Nope. I would never sail the same boat as them. Kasuke chuckled. The worth of a person is not found in the threads of their clothing, but in the fibers of their character. Mine is incredibly pure and lovable. Kazuya never thought he would find someone more shameless than himself, yet here he was, getting swept into Kasuke's incredible bullshit. You are not a Shinigami, then what are you? Just a handsome merchant in possession of the most useful shop. Kasuke fished out a silver card from his sleeve and waved it around cheerfully. Here, feel free to visit when you find yourself in trouble. Of course, our excellent service comes at a cost. Helping people that intrigued him then owing them a favor, Kasuke Urahara's motto was simple yet very effective in making backup strategies for the backup strategies. I asked about your race. That's dangerously close to racism. Should I report you to the spiritual realm's civil rights authority? Kazuya furrowed his brow. Since when asking about someone's race become a violation? Kasuke pressed a hand against his chest. I already told you I'm just your merchant who happened to have a shop in this town. My race and background are irrelevant. Any further inquiry is an attack on my privacy. How long have you been peeping on me? The moment you opened the closet. They exchanged an awkward glance before Kazuya took a sigh of relief. It would be problematic if Kasuke saw his regeneration, a skill mostly possessed by Hollow, not Quincy. It would be challenging to explain the origin of his regeneration skill to the guy who knew almost everything about all the races. I'll need a different approach. I gotta open his old wounds. Looking out of the window, Kasuke said, I'm afraid our conversation ends here for today. I need to retire for the night and open my shop early in the morning. Kasuke Urahara, you have changed, he whispered, a serene smile on his face. The former captain of the 12th Division. The groundbreaking innovator behind Siridi's Research and Development Institute. I heard you're now known as the exiled Shinigami in Siridi. Gone was the laid-back Kasuke, his lazy eyes replaced by a focused stare. Kazuya seemed clueless about the spiritual world in their last meeting, now he seemed to know things most Shinigami of this era wouldn't. The stark change was completely out of Kazuya's calculations. I'm sorry about acting like that on that rainy day. I had to make sure you were the real Kazuya Urahara, not some fake illusion made by that guy. Narrowing his eyes, Kazuya gripped his cane, which happened to be his Zanpakuto in disguise. Where did you get this information? The information about Aizen's betrayal was only known to Vizard, Yoruchi, Tessai, and him. None of them were foolish enough to divulge such information, apart from the young lady living in this mansion. Nobody. Kazuya shook his head. I don't feel safe talking about him here. Can we go somewhere more private? Are you talking about? Aizen, yes, no, not now. Fuck! He grimaced as he sensed the formation of a garganta not far from his location. A hollow had breached the living world to prey on innocent souls. It was significantly weaker than the Minos Grande, a hollow yet to evolve from its base state, still a challenging foe for average Quincy. Kazuya sighed and waved his hand. Take care of it and meet me at my shop in the morning. The address is on the card. Kazuya said his piece and phased through the wall like a ghost, leaving behind no trace of his Ryoryoku. He clicked his tongue. The mention of Aizen's treachery had fully captured Kazuya's interest. Despite being a scientist, Kazuya was far from a heartless individual. He banked everything on Kazuya being understanding of his fabricated circumstances. If he played his cards right, Kazuya might just help him and his hollow companions. Even getting Hogyoku for Haribel and others wouldn't be out of the question. I have to be patient. Izumi barged into his room, her face solemn. You need to come with us. He held her shoulder and looked right into her eyes. Wani-chan, go to bed. I'll take care of it. She shook her head defiantly. This hollow isn't weak. Akira and Katsumi have already left. I'll support them while you can observe the battle. She gave him the observer role in his first meeting with the hollow, despite having full knowledge of his abilities. Her overprotectiveness towards him was on another level. You're so stubborn. He sighed, massaging his forehead. I prohibit you from fighting. She crossed her arms and met his stern gaze with her own. On what grounds are you ordering me, the matriarch of Ishida clan? Stop with the bullshit, Baka Wani-chan. I will let you fight on one condition, prioritize your safety. If things go wrong, flee at the first moment. As if I'll let it escalate that far. Have some confidence in your pupil, Izumi-sensei. Chapter 47, Vice Captain. Kazuya's crew arrived at the scene in a car. The battleground was a children's playground. Katsumi and Akira danced a deadly ballet around the hollow, flinging rapier arrows against its grotesque carapace. This hollow, a monstrosity inspired by a giant beetle, wore a white mask adorned with red teeth, a sign of its victims. Izumi's face twisted. Katsumi! One, Izumi-sama, Katsumi bellowed back, her voice echoing with regret. We arrived a tick too late. Akira squeaked in between breaths, Izumi-sama, this overgrown beetle has high-speed regeneration like Wolverine. It's shrugging off our attacks. We can't stall it for long. In theory, Kazuya could have obliterated the hollow with the sheer force of his fully unleashed Ryoryoku. But unleashing such a formidable power would be akin to inviting more formidable hollows. If a gang of Ajuchas showed up, Izumi might just have a heart attack on the spot. Izumi gripped her Quincy cross, torn between her promise to Kazuya and the need to aid her comrades. It's no time to hesitate. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Remember what we discussed. Allow me to handle this. Harvesting the ambient rapier, he created a spirit crossbow. With a swift draw and release, he unleashed half a dozen azure arrows, each heading for a different limb of the hollow. The giant hollow, engrossed in its pursuit of the two Quincies, failed to detect its incoming doom. The azure bolts smashed into its 6 limbs, decimating them. No matter how alert, the hollow stood no chance of evading bolts moving with such blistering velocity. He had gotten significantly better after getting a hang of the bow's mechanism and shape. The D-legged hollow let out a gut-wrenching screech, thrashing about on the ground like a beetle flipped on its back. Moments later, its limbs reformed, and it charged at Kazuya in pure rage. "Watch out!" He shrugged off Izumi's warning. With an eerily calm demeanor, he fired 6 more bolts in an instant, dismembering the hollow once again. Izumi's face paled as Kazuya repeated his brutal cycle, his face an emotionless mask as if he had grown comfortably numb to such gore. Even Katsumi and Akira couldn't help but tremble at his merciless methods. Finally, when the hollow had exhausted its reservoir of Riryoku, Kazuya let it writhe helplessly on the ground. He turned to Izumi, his face breaking into a grin that was a bit too wide to be comforting. "Done. I have no words for your growth," Izumi said and tossed the car keys at him. "You can return home. I'll handle the talks with Shinigami. You can't just shoo me away when the fun part is about to begin. I want to have a chat with the Shinigami too." As long as Izumi stayed out of the mansion, he had no chance of sneaking out of town to rendezvous with Haribel. He might as well stick around to see who would be dispatched to Karakura town after he had effectively set off the Suriidi's alarms with the presence of 2 errand cars. Lucky for him, a lone Shinigami showed up in a couple of minutes. A tall man with a sharp face and black hair. His Ryatsu was on par with Jillian's, but Kazuya could sense something off about him. The Soul Reaper had the aura of a veteran. Vice captains and captains get a restraining seal in the living world, don't they? This guy should at least be a vice captain. There was a flicker of recognition in Kazuya's mind, a sense of familiarity, but the Shinigami's name remained just beyond his grasp. As the black-haired Shinigami took in the scene, the Quincy group and the squirming hollow, an expression of startled surprise crept onto his face. "Who are you folks? Did you do this to this poor fellow?" Akira and Katsumi exchanged glances before pointing, almost in unison, towards Kazuya's back. Izumi, without a trace of guilt, followed suit and threw him under the bus. "My Otudo is heartless." Kazuya's face twitched. "I could have killed it if you didn't teach me the importance of balance in 3 realms." "Balance?" Shinigami's eyes widened, a spark of understanding in his black eyes. "Ah, I see. You are Quincy, the clan that was said to have been wiped from existence a century and a half ago." He would have known about Ishida clan if he bothered reading the files given to him. Alas, he wasn't the type to go through a stack of reports. A shadow fell across Izumi's face, her eyes clouding over. "And who is responsible for wiping our race?" The Shinigami scratched at the nape of his neck, the weight of the Quincy's tragic history seemingly hanging heavy in the air. "I didn't mean to open old wounds. It's surprising to encounter your kind. I'm Kyan Shiba, the vice captain of the 13th Squad." Kazuya felt a jolt of recognition. Kyan was from the Shiba clan, a once noble lineage that had fallen from grace in the Soul Society. Isshin Kurosaki, Ichigo's father, was a Shiba before he took on the monumental task of suppressing Masaki's hollow. Kyan's death played a big role in Rukia's growth as a Shinigami and a person. Him being alive meant Rukia was still in the 13th Squad or she had yet to graduate from the Shinigami Academy. Kyan pivoted to face the hollow and unsheathed his Zanpakuto. "We can continue our conversation once I put this fellow out of his suffering." With a swift, almost merciful motion, Kyan cleaved the beetle-like hollow into 2 perfect halves. The hollow let out a final, agonized shriek before its form flickered and evaporated into nothingness. The hollow was cleansed and sent to Soul Society. With a sigh, Kyan slid his katana back into its sheath. "I was expecting a group of hollows, turns out it was just one guy. Could it be the scout? He would have been here earlier if he hadn't been dozing off like a hibernating bear." "Better safe than sorry," Kazuya said, a smirk playing on his lips. "By the way, what's this about errand cars? You guys probably don't know about errand cars. They are hollows who take off their masks. They are not much of a threat except the Minos like Jillian, Ajuchas, and Vasto Lord. Kyan narrowed his eyes. Suriidii is taking this matter seriously. I'll be in the town for a few days." His captain, Joshua Yukitake, had dispatched him to monitor the hollow activities. Being a vice captain, he came alone, armed with his Zanpakuto. The news of a Vasto Lorde-Arrancar had sent ripples of concern through the Gotei 13. Shunsui Kairaku believed that the Hollows were planning a full-scale invasion of this town under the guidance of a Vasto Lord leader. In an ironic twist of fate, Kyan stood before the very Vasto Lord he was supposed to be on guard against, completely clueless. Suppressing a laugh, Kazuya said, "Well, try not to be so late next time. It's a pain to hold back on small fries." Kyan observed Kazuya before bursting into laughter. "I like your confidence. It reminds me of my captain's best friend. Well, Quincy friends, I think my job is done here. Good night." Kyan never thought he would be befriending people of a near-extinct clan of Hollow Slayers. After saying a brief greeting to everyone, Kane departed in a good mood. Meanwhile, Izumi stood rooted to the spot, her face ashen. She was all too aware of the power of a vice-captain. Even her husband would struggle against such a formidable opponent. Now, one of them would be casually strolling around their town. Add to that the terrifying potential of Minos-class Arrancars, and she was sure about having sleepless nights until the matter was solved. Chapter 48, The Black Cat. Time and time again, a black cat could be seen skillfully leaping from one rooftop to another in Suriidai. No one knew where this cat came from or how it could dodge any Shinigami that tried catching it. This agile cat had become a mystery and an often-told story among the Gotei 13. The cat was, in fact, Yoruichi Shihoin, a banished Shinigami who was exiled along with Kasuke Urahara and Tessai Tsukabshi. Before her banishment, her reputation in the Soul Society was legendary. Few were given the title of Shuimpa Master, but Yoruichi went further in her pursuit of agility, earning the respected title of Flash Goddess. At one point in her life, she held the title for the youngest captain in the history of Amatsukido, the special forces of the Soul Society, as well as the captain of the second squad of Gotei 13. Like her noble titles, Yoruichi was born into the nobility of the prestigious Shihoin family, one of the 5 great noble clans of the Soul Society. Her family, renowned for their stealth and agility, were masters of Kido, a unique form of combat derived from demon arts. As a princess, she carried the weight of expectations from the first day of her life. She didn't lose to the pressure, rather she excelled in her family arts. Even among the Shihoin, Yoruichi's abilities stood out. She was excellent in hand-to-hand combat, stealth, and had impressive control over Kido spells. But, despite her noble birth and all its advantages, Yoruichi wanted something more. The formal lifestyle and strict rules irritated her free spirit. She found hope in Kasuke Urahara, a man from a fallen noble clan who had come to live at the Shihoin mansion with Tessai Tsukabshi. Despite his humble beginnings, Kasuke was a man of extraordinary talent. While she had friends to spend time with, Yoruichi could not often leave the clan's estate. When her own family limited her freedom, Yoruichi came up with a creative solution. She developed a technique that let her turn into a cat at will. Decades later, Kasuke became the captain of the 12th Squad, and Tessai became the captain of the Kido Corps. Less than a decade later, Kasuke and Tessai were arrested for experimentation on fellow Shinigami. Yoruichi was at a crossroads. Loyalty or duty? In a heartbeat, she gave up everything for her friends. Her status, her titles, her family, she left it all behind in order to help Kasuke keep his Shinigami powers. The Central 46 labeled them as exiled Shinigami, forbidding them from entering Senkamen, the doorway to Soul Society. Did that keep Yoruichi away from the Soul Society? Not at all. Her ability to transform into a cat altered her Ryatsu's signature just enough to sneak past the Senkamen restriction. Thus, she made a new legend, the legend of the Black Cat. Currently, Yoruichi relaxed under the moonlight in her cat form, her tongue smoothly sweeping over the bowl filled with creamy milk. Her old pal Kakaku Shiba savored the sake from a cup held in her tattooed arm, her only arm. Yoruichi, you have balls of steel to pull that off with Byakuya Kuchiki. Kukaku had met Byakuya once in Suriidai. The first meeting alone made her quite terrified of Byakuya's Ryatsu and his icy demeanor. As bold as Kukaku was, she wouldn't dare mess around with Byakuya. Playing tag with him was a thrill, the black feline replied, her masculine contradicting her actual gender, a trait exclusive to her feline form. The lad is still training under his old man? Despite being the same age, she treated Byakuya as if he was way younger than her. I believe he is, Kukaku confirmed, setting down her sake cup to pick up her pipe, taking in a satisfying, smoky drag. Won't be long before he succeeds as the 28th head of Kuchiki clan and takes on the captain position in the 6th squad. Still won't beat me in speed. Yoruchi laughed as she cleaned her whiskers with her paw. Nya. I am feeling sleepy now. It's my time to sleep, too. You can stay the night here. Don't mind if I do. Yoruchi harbored a special fondness for Kukaku, primarily because of her unfiltered, down-to-earth nature. In stark contrast to the pretentious nobility, Kukaku acted according to her heart, giving no care to what others thought of her. They shared an unyielding spirit and philosophy, leading their lives according to a unique creed, to never shy away from bold choices even if they changed their lives forever. As Yoruchi curled up on the wooden floor, the fluttering wings of a butterfly disturbed her peace. A Jigakucho, the spirit butterfly traditionally employed as a messenger by the Shinigami, drifted around her. Shop awaits you. The message, as devoid of emotion as the emptiness of space, echoed within her mind, prompting her eyes to widen in alarm. Kisuke? She hastily departed for the living world. The moment Yoruchi entered Kisuke's living room, she found him poised in quiet contemplation, his hand restlessly fidgeting with the brim of his hat. They hadn't met each other for almost a decade now, a time frame considered months for the long-living Shinigami race. Kisuke? Yoruchi, you've returned, Kisuke greeted, his usually jovial tone swapped for an uncharacteristically somber one. Shall we catch up before or after milk? I'm not hungry. Tell me, how did you send a Jigakucho? They only restricted me from entering Senkamen. It's easy to imbue Jigakucho with a Ryatsu signature different from mine. You're still obsessed with that? Are you that desperate to enter the Soul Society? Obsession is the greatest driving force, Kisuke mused, waving his paper fan. Now, what did I call you here for? Yoruchi brought her paw up and flashed her sharp claws. I can cut 9,000 times in a second. Do you want to test me? Kisuke raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. We have a problem. A big problem. A problem you can't solve on your own? She had seen him coming up with ingenious solutions that nobody could have ever thought of. His intellect and adaptability were terrifying, even for her. Kisuke nodded in affirmation. Today I met a man. A man, you say? Yoruchi's chuckle tinged the air with mild mockery. Who knew our Kisuke Urahara swung that way? Kisuke swatted her head lightly with his fan. Let's focus, shall we? How many people know about Aizen's true nature? Huh. That would be us and the Visored. The man you met today. Yup, he knows about Aizen's hypnosis and his betrayal. There is something more bizarre, Yoruchi. He is part of the Quincy clan. Quincy? Now that's a name I haven't heard for a century. Yoruchi narrowed her golden eyes. Who leaked it to him? So it wasn't you. It must be one of the Visored. They opened their mouth against their will or. It's another one of Aizen's tricks to shake us. That bastard is like a fox. Kisuke couldn't help but let out a chuckle. Oh, how interesting it'd be if Aizen is pulling the strings here. His intuition told him otherwise, but he never trusted his judgment against Aizen. The treacherous Shinigami had shown to manipulate the Central 40 SIXS judgment. How hard would it be to send a man at their doorstep pretending to oppose Aizen? Yoruchi snorted. Interesting for you only. A pain in the ass for the rest. Don't worry. We'll get to the bottom of this tomorrow when we have a heart-to-heart with our Quincy friend. Chapter 49, Control. Kazuya laid on the bed the whole night, pondering about every scenario that could take place today. It was a day of monumental importance, and he couldn't afford a single mistake. The door creaked open just as the clock hit the 8 o'clock mark. Lisa came to wake him. Instead of doing her task, she observed him with ice in her gaze. His acting skill, which fooled Tyr Harabel's hollow senses, easily made a mockery of former Shinigami Lisa. What ticked her off? Splash! He didn't expect her to throw a bucket worth of cold water on him. Rising from his dampened bed, he stretched languidly, a yawn escaping his lips. He was unperturbed, as if Lisa didn't give him a non-consensual bath. To think you'll bathe me on my bed to save my time, you are so caring, Lisa, he praised her with a soft smile. You missed a couple of spots and forgot to apply soap. Lisa's hands twitched, barely holding back from giving his neck a little squeeze. She grabbed a pillow and held it like a warhammer over him. What did you say to Izumi-sama? Why is she sending me on a date with you? Lisa being angry and flustered was a positive sign since she acted calm and collected to everyone. She was showing more and more of her true personality hidden beneath the cool facade. He released a long sigh. I'm sorry, but I have to cancel that date. As if frozen in a block of ice, Lisa paused, her lips parting into a stunned O. Her shocked face was a sight to behold. He smiled. Let me guess the reason for your shock. Your anger was just a facade, and you actually looked forward to a date with me. Lisa was caught red-handed. Her plan was to throw a tantrum and reluctantly agree to go on the date, her first ever date with a man. Ever since she came to the living world, she had been stuck in the same loop of eating, reading, training, and sleeping. She was a little excited to do something new. The same feeling had led her to accept this spy job. She narrowed her eyes. It was a rare opportunity to relax outside of my job. Yes, I was looking forward to it. Her acceptance caught him off guard. Since you want it so badly, I'll give you a date once I'm free. And what could possibly be keeping you busy? She raised the question out of curiosity. From what she had heard, he recently came to the town searching for Quincy. Apart from Izumi and Lisa, he shouldn't know anyone unless he found romance. Instead of questioning him, her head weaved a romantic tale between Kazuya and a random beautiful maiden he stumbled upon. I have to know if it's true. Kazuya narrowed his eyes. Don't even think about following me. Lisa nodded, her mind whirring with possible outfits that would allow her to merge seamlessly with the crowd. She had already decided about stalking him today. Why are you so stubborn? Kazuya sprang from his bed and advanced towards her, shrinking the distance between them until he was firmly in her personal bubble. He lifted her chin, holding her gaze. You can hide your Ryuryoku, but the darkness in your soul? It shines like a candle in pitch black. I can pick you blindly from a crowd 10 out of 10 times. Lisa stiffened before her hand instinctively reached for her Zanpakuto. By the time she realized her Zanpakuto was left in visored base, he had left the room. She stood rooted, a trickle of sweat inching its way down her face. How is that possible? Kisuke's special Ryatsu concealing Jigai should have camouflaged all traces of her Ryatsu, even the faintest whiff of her hollow aura. What do I do now? She pressed her hand against her face. Her scara turned black and eyes red. Let me take control. I'll handle the rest. The words she spoke weren't her own. They belonged to her inner hollow, which exerted control over her in moments of weakness. It wanted her to relinquish control and sink into the pit of bottomless instinct. Everyone of Visored experiences similar things now and then, and will continue to do so until they fully take control over their hollow. Get lost. She steeled herself, suppressing her inner hollow, and soon her eyes returned to their normal state. Apart from Shunsui Kairaku, her ex-captain, only Kazuya had ever rattled her composure like this. She let out an annoyed click of her tongue. I'll get him to fess up everything, no matter what it takes. Kazuya narrowed his eyes, taking in the swinging sign overhead. Urahara shop. He rapped on the door, which was promptly answered by a mountain of a man with a thick mustache connected to his sideburns. Tessai Sakabashi, Kisuke Urahara's right-hand man, was decked out in a black apron over a laid-back white tee and blue jeans combo. The guy looked like a gangster instead of a shopkeeper assistant. Tensai straightened his rectangle-framed glasses, his expression as unyielding as a wall. State your business. Kazuya Urahara invited me here last night. You're his guest. Come inside. Kazuya followed the big man through the hallway and arrived at the meeting spot. He could feel two presences inside, both masterfully restraining their Ryuryoku. As Tensai slid the door open, Kazuya saw Kazuya sitting side by side with a black cat. Her golden eyes narrowed as she spotted him. She is here. Her appearance by Kazuya's side was no surprise. Chapter 50, A Tactical Nuke. Yoruichi observed the young man, intrigue sparkling in her golden eyes. Shinigami, soul, aged strangely in the Soul Society, but humans, Quincy, were not renowned for their longevity, at least the one she was familiar with. Despite appearing no older than 25, he wielded Ryuryoku rivaling that of a captain class. She found this fact hard to swallow. Is he really the one? Doubt, unmasked and raw, crept into her voice as she questioned Kazuya. You were pulling my leg about this, right? Nope. Kazuya's eyebrows shot up, a flash of surprise in his eyes. I didn't think Urahara-san was fond of talking cats. One of your crazy inventions? Kazuya opened the paper fan and concealed his smirk. Yoruichi-san is a natural cat I found in the Shihoin mansion. Some pussies are irresistible, they say. Shihoin? Don't tell me this is Yoruichi Shihoin. The slightest widening of Yoruichi's eyes betrayed her surprise. You seem rather well versed in our ways. Who enlightened you about the Seriidii? A friend, a family member, or a stranger from the other side? Skipping the flimsy pleasantries, she dived straight into the crux of the matter. Before Kazuya could utter a response, Kazuya smoothly interjected, Yoruichi-san, let's offer our guest a seat first. I wouldn't want any rumors about my shop lacking in common courtesy. With a graceful sweep of her paw, Yoruichi motioned towards a cushion set opposite to her. Take a seat. Kazuya moved forward at Tensai's gentle push, the door sliding shut behind him. Relax, guys, he muttered, calmly settling down under Yoruichi's intense stare. I'll reveal everything, but first, stop acting like I'm here to steal your candies. Kazuya couldn't help but chuckle. He is telling you to chill, Yoruichi-san. Yoruichi snarled, baring her feline fangs. What? I'm as calm as a moon's reflection on a still pond. It's you who looks uncomfortable. Deflecting the blame towards Kazuya was a convenient way to downplay her own impatience. In response, Kazuya merely shrugged. Urahara-san, promise me one favor in exchange for my information. I can guarantee the information will be helpful in your ongoing battle against Aizen. Kazuya paused, stroking his chin thoughtfully. He was not one to be easily indebted, but the stakes were too high to dismiss this offer. While he had faith in Yamamoto's power, he doubted that Seriidii would anticipate a threat from their most peaceful-looking captain. Things might escalate too far by the time they realized their mistake. Aizen's holification experiments and his Kyoka Sujetsu made him such a terrifying wild card in his eyes. Kazuya bobbed his head in agreement. If it's within reason, the always charming and trustworthy Kazuya Urahara will lend a hand. Just once. Yoruichi swiveled to face Kazuya, a hint of warning in her tone as she spoke, careful with the promises you make. Being a former noble and former commander of the 2nd Squad, she was well acquainted with individuals exploiting favors for their own malicious purposes. Though she didn't take Kazuya as the careless type, a note of concern lingered. I know what I'm doing. Kazuya dismissed her worries with a wave of his hand and a playful tap on the table. Now, time for you to uphold your end, Kazuya-san. The easy acceptance from Kazuya was an unexpected curveball. Still, Kazuya remained stoic, all business, with no room for playfulness. I know a lot about Aizen because I used to be a seated officer serving Aizen. Even that didn't protect me from becoming a part of his plan. I ended up embroiled in his holification, consumed by a hollow soul planted in mine. Thus, he unveiled the first chapter of his twisted tale, a narrative that would have been impossible without his meta-understanding of this world. Wah! Wait, what do you mean you died? Is this reincarnation? Kasuke concluded Yoruichi's sentence, his face a mask of grave seriousness. A flawed reincarnation, where the soul retains its memories. I have encountered a few such instances during my study, though none significant enough to raise alarm. Kasuke had delved into the deepest reaches of Shihoin's family archives, seeking the most obscure knowledge concerning the spiritual world, like the god of Shinigami being an anchor of 3 realms, a husk of his former self. A god who was massacred by 5 noble families out of fear for his power. Seeing Kasuke deep in thought, Kazuya smiled appreciatively. There was an undeniable pleasure in the company of razor-sharp minds that saw profound meaning in the most nonsensical words. It's easy to bullshit with the genius ones. He crossed his arms and nodded his head. Exactly. I reincarnated as a hollow. His bold declaration was meant to be a calculated nuke on their minds, to provoke a reaction. He awaited their responses with an impish gleam in his eyes. Even under dire circumstances, his natural trickster spirit couldn't be suppressed. Kasuke remained composed, his eyebrows arching in amused interest at the outrageous claim. In stark contrast, Yoruichi reacted like a storm, hissing, her pupils shrinking to pinpricks, her tail standing straight in agitation. She looked ready to carve his face apart with her claws. Even a blind Shinigami can tell the difference between a Quincy and a hollow. Do you take us for fools? His tale of betrayal had her entranced until he shattered the illusion with an outlandishly false claim. As a former Shinigami, she knew all too well the intricacies of souls and the delicate balance of realms. The notion of a soul reincarnating with its memories was well within the realm of plausibility, but a Quincy claiming to be a hollow? That was nothing short of ridiculous. Ease up, Yoruichi-san, Kasuke implored with a calming gesture and glanced at Kazuya. Yoruichi-san isn't known for her patience but for her vicious actions as the commander of Amatsukido. Kazuya-san, I won't be able to hold her back if you don't provide a reasonable explanation. Unwittingly, Kasuke and Yoruichi had slipped into the timeless good cop, bad cop dynamic. Kazuya calmly took the cup of tea under Yoruichi's calm gaze. I intended to explain, but Shihoin-san interrupted me. Let's put that aside for now. Urahara-san, can this house conceal Ryatsu? What I am about to do may alarm Quincy and Shinigami alike. It can, Yoruichi said and got up, walking to the door. I have no interest in your lies anymore. Just as she reached to slide open the door, she stopped as if struck by a bolt of lightning. The Ryatsu of a hollow, mightier than her own, seized her attention like a vice. Whirling around, she saw Kazuya surrounded by a sky-blue Ryatsu. Even though she couldn't see his face from her position, she could see the horns coming from the side of his head. He looked over his shoulder, smiling after giving them the shock of their lifetime. Shihoin-san, do you believe me now? Chapter 51, Exchange. The room succumbed to a hush, a quiet so profound it seemed to envelop every corner, every nook and cranny. This tranquility was abruptly shattered by Tessai, his steps echoing as he hastily pushed open the door. A hollow? This man is a hollow? How? Even the former commander of Kido Corps couldn't wrap his hands around a Quincy suddenly turning into a hollow. Kazuya stood amidst the chaos, a smug grin played upon his lips. I apologize for being so abrupt. I expected you to react with a little surprise, nothing more. Rising from his seat, Kasuke's black haori fluttered in the wake of Kazuya's surging power. An uncanny gleam danced in his eyes, and he couldn't hide his intrigue. Well. What's surprising is your ability, Kazuya-san. The errand card troubling all of us for the last few days had been you all along. How did you master your hollow aura this well? The ever-so-innovative Kasuke couldn't help but ask a question out of curiosity. He had long abandoned the notion of hollows being evil during his pursuit of removing the boundaries between Shinigami and hollow. For him, the person mattered more than a person's race. Mask? No, that's a misunderstanding. Kazuya gestured towards his face, his hollow characteristics seamlessly morphing back to normal, and his wings folding back into his body. This isn't concealment, it's transformation. A bitter irony to become a hollow after a lifetime of slaughtering them. He kept feeding them lies mixed with grains of truth. Yoruichi approached him and touched his back, her animosity replaced with a look of curiosity. Can you transform again? I'm not a lab specimen. Besides, weren't you going to leave? What is keeping you around, Shihoin-san? I would have surely left, boy, if you didn't show me this. I don't even know what to call this. Kisuke, do you think it's possible, or are we under some kind of ability that's fooling all of our senses, like Aizen? Kisuke considered her question, a contemplative frown etching into his features. He turned to Tessai. What you said can be possible. But I don't think it is the case here. Tessai, did you sense Kazuya-san's hollow aura? Tessai, who was standing at the door, nodded. I sensed it clearly. It's why I ran over here. See, Yoruichi-san. Tessai couldn't have been under the same illusion as us, well, unless Kazuya-san can trick people who are far away from his sight. Didn't that happen to Shinji? Tessai retorted, planting seeds of doubt. We can't rule out the possibility of Kazuya-san possessing a similar ability to Aizen. Kazuya rubbed the back of his head. Aizen's betrayal raised their wariness toward his unprecedented ability. Even Tessai, who was mostly chill and calm, questioned the reality laid before his eyes. He transformed under Yoruichi's scrutinizing gaze. What do you say? Is this real or just an illusion? With a dismissive wave of his paper fan, Kisuke interjected, Aizen's Zanpakuto is relatively unknown, and he himself has a formidable Ryatsu, above your average captains. Kazuya-san, forgive us for doubting you. We shouldn't have used Aizen's illusions as an excuse for our ignorance. Ignorance? Yoruichi chuckled. We have to thank Aizen for tricking you. He helped us learn so many new things that we wouldn't have come across as Shinigami. Kazuya smiled. The more you know. Yoruichi ran her claws over his thighs before she turned to Kisuke. I wasn't seeing things. His body changes from Kishi to Reisher when he changes to Hollow. Kisuke had invented Reisher Henkinki to convert Kishi to Reisher and vice versa. Kazuya achieved the same result with no external help. I can see that, Kisuke said. From Shinigami to Hollow to Quincy. Kazuya-san here is a peculiar case. Kazuya returned to his hollow form and crossed his arms. About the information I promised. I know some of Aizen's plans and his end goal. Kisuke's eyes widened. How did you? Don't ask me how. Aizen wants the Hogyoku in your possession. That item is crucial to his plans, creating Oken. He is after the key to the royal palace. A silent exchange transpired between Kisuke and Yoruichi, their eyes echoing a mutual understanding. We didn't expect it to be Oken, Yoruichi said. Kazuya, what does Aizen Sōsuke want with the royal palace? Your guess is as good as mine, Kazuya said. I held my end of the bargain. Kisuke-san, you should fulfill yours. Kisuke stepped back and held his Zanpakuto. I did make a promise. Well, what can this handsome shopkeeper do for you? I need shelter. Granted. A handsome hollow like yours is welcome to my underground chamber. Kisuke happily welcomed Kazuya, who was a treasure trove of knowledge on all three major races, Hollow, Shinigami, and Quincy. Not just for me. Kazuya shook his head. You see, I made some friends during my time in Hueco Mundo. Sue, can you make some Ryatsu concealing Jigai for them? I haven't made one for hollows yet, but I can try. However, you or anyone isn't allowed to eat human souls while you're here. Heh. They won't. Weak souls won't interest them. Yoruichi sat down. Are you making a hollow army to take revenge on Aizen? Kazuya smiled. Do not seek beauty in battle. Do not seek virtue in death. Do not make the mistake of considering only your own life. If you wish to protect that which you must protect, slice the enemy you must defeat from behind. He repeated the Shinigami's creed that stuck with him more than most quotes. With that, he ripped open a garganta and stuck his hand inside. I'm gonna fetch my friends. See you soon. He stepped into the garganta, only to sense Yoruichi releasing a burst of Ryuryoku. He turned around to see Yoruichi flying into the shrinking garganta. Chapter 52, Protector. Kazuya's gaze lingered on the fading portal, the corners of his lips lifting in an amused smirk. Yoruichi's impulsive action didn't surprise him in the least. She was always the one for exploration. Kazuya's friends or Kazuya had caught her intrigue. Perhaps the limitless expanse of Hueco Mundo offered an allure she couldn't resist. Deciphering her motivations, however, was akin to hunting for a single cloud in a boundless sky. There she goes on her own, Tessai said, giving a resigned shake of his head. His gaze then turned questioning towards Kazuya. Was that the right trade-off? Was the information a justifiable reason to hide several Arrancars from the Soul Society? In response, Kazuya lifted 2 fingers. Consider 2 things, Tessai. Firstly, Hueco Mundo provides more protection from the Siriidii than our shop. I suspect they're running from something in Hueco Mundo, something potentially more powerful than Kazuya himself. Tessai's eyes widened behind his rectangular glasses. The thought of a hollow boasting a stronger Reiatsu than Kazuya was unnerving, to say the least. Who could that possibly be? I have no idea. And the second point? Some investments might appear precarious in the short term, but they yield unexpected dividends when you least anticipate it. Kazuya-san is that type of investment. Having Kazuya's friendship might just tip the favor in his hidden warfare against Aizen. Though banished by the Siriidii, the heart in his chest was still that of a Shinigami. Protecting Siriidii and the balance will always be his duty. As he digested this information, Tessai absent-mindedly twirled his mustache. I still find it hard to grasp what Kazuya truly is. Kazuya chuckled at Tessai's confusion. Regarding Kazuya-san, I have a hunch about the source of his transformation. He had come across equally baffling things when he was brought to Shihoin Mansion. It was only a matter of time before he understood every aspect of his confusion. What is it? I'll share when I'm absolutely certain, Kazuya replied, rising to dust off his Haori sleeves. Now, excuse me. I need to prepare a guest house for our new allies. I want to procrastinate. While Kazuya fully expected Yoruichi's action, Kazuya wasn't of the same mind. The black cat began walking by his side, her tail swinging in a rhythm. She acted like she expected him to understand her intentions on his own. Shihoin-san, we hollows have a saying, don't enter another man's garganta if you are not prepared for a battle to death. You are 100 years early to challenge me, Yoruichi retorted with a chuckle, her golden eyes surveying the vast void surrounding them. It's my first time inside a garganta. It sure is a boring place. Throughout her extensive lifespan, she had never ventured into a garganta, the mysterious travel route accessible only to hollows. Hueco Mundo isn't any better than this, he said with a shrug. Let's hurry now, shall we? I can't wait to meet my friends. Neither can I wait to make their acquaintance. She undoubtedly took an interest in his companions. They hurried across the garganta until Yoruichi abruptly halted him with a light kick on his shin. Stop! I sense your Reiatsu on the other side of this. He honed his senses, detecting a faint trail of lingering Reiatsu. Yes, it seems to be scattered everywhere. Everyone can sense other Reiatsu more acutely than their own, Yoruichi explained. You've been in the living world for a week, why is your Reiatsu still here in such a high concentration? That's probably the place I became an Arrancar. He cracked his knuckles and spread open his wings. Let's get out here. Rending open the fabric of space, they emerged into the stark, desolate landscape of Hueco Mundo. Yoruichi swiveled her head in all directions, taking in the stark contrast to the vibrant human world. Beneath a jet-black sky, the endless white expanse stretched out, punctuated by an enlarged moon. This realm of hollows, defined by an unsettling silence and stark desolation, was a sight she had not beheld in a while. A world fitting souls known as hollows. Indeed. As Kazuya probed for Haribel's Ryatsu, he detected a potent presence lurking nearby, and Ajuchas, likely on par with Apache. He dismissed the Ajuchas from his concern and resumed his search. They are concealing their Ryatsu, but I can still feel it. Their safety rid him of his worries. He just had to go out there and search for them. He turned to Yoruchi with a mischievous grin. I'm going to use Sonito now. Shihoin-san, do you think you can keep up? Who do you think you are talking to? Flash Goddess Yoruchi won't be surpassed by a mere Vasto Lord. She was a tad rusty from decades spent lounging in her cat form. Her speed, an attribute she held in high regard, hadn't diminished to the point of being challenged by a young man like him. Kazuya's grin widened, sensing his question got under her skin. Let's put that to the test, then. With a resounding crack, he surged ahead using Sonito. His body was way tougher after becoming an Arrancar, allowing him to use Sonito at a higher level than before. He looked over his shoulder for a moment. Yoruchi and her cat flashed over long distances, trailing him from the ground without much difficulty. Yoruchi bared her fangs. Impressive. Very impressive. Although she was far from her peak, Kazuya's speed was one of the best even in the Seriidii. As the overwhelming Ryatsu faded, a centaur-like hollow cautiously stepped out from her hiding place. A pair of sharp eyes behind her mask locked onto the fading silver and white figures in the distance. One of their Ryatsu's signatures had been so potent that it almost made her heart stop during her slumber. It was the same ancient Ryatsu lingering everywhere in this place. Vasto Lord. This marked the second time she had crossed paths with such a formidable hollow in this exact spot. Just the day before, a group of powerful hollows had stayed here for an extensive time. And now, another strong presence made its appearance. She clenched her double-sided lance. Why are strong hollows gathering here? What is happening in Hueco Mundo? The thought of an impending war brewing beneath this unsettling silence troubled her. Neliel Tuo del Schwank couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling that a war was brewing beneath this unsettling silence. War signified conflict, and conflict invariably led to death, pain, and suffering. As an Ajuchas, she could only spectate as these superior Vasto Lord fought each other like beasts. I need to leave. With that resolve, she swiftly galloped across the stark white desert. After several minutes of swift travel, she arrived at her destination, a cave that led to a shelter constructed within a mountain. Sensing her familiar presence, a variety of hollows scurried out of the myriad of openings dotting the cavernous walls, joyfully greeting Neliel with cute noises. Amidst these tiny hollows, she stood like a titan. Her lips twitched behind her mask before breaking into a small smile that nobody could see. I'm back. Their enthusiastic responses filled the air with a medley of sounds, each more endearing than the last. Cats, dogs, rabbits, and even birds, each being here was utterly fragile and defenseless. So feeble they were, that even a faint residue of Vasto Lord's Ryatsu could eradicate them entirely. Despite their fragility, these hollows thrived here without the need for food or Ryoryoku. The ambient erasure of Hueco Mundo nourished their souls sufficiently, as if destiny had willed them to survive against all odds. For years, she had committed herself to the protection of this village of lesser hollows. This self-imposed duty of defending them against other hollows had given her a sense of purpose. A purpose that drove her every day. While she couldn't stop the Vasto Lord from fighting, she could at least shield the village with her own Ryatsu. Chapter 53, Promise. Unbeknownst to Kazuya, Haribel and her group were caught in their own maelstrom of troubles. Nestled deep within a gargantuan underground cave, the five women were surprisingly quiet, a solemn air surrounding all of them. Surachi flew out of the giant hole over their head to scout the surroundings. Moments later, she landed back in the cave. I can't sense him anywhere. Neither can I, admitted Haribel, her fingers gently caressing the mysterious egg clutched tightly to her chest as though its presence offered some form of comfort. It could be a trap to lure us out. Surachi's brows knitted together in concern. It absolutely is. Despite their heightened caution, they had yet to catch sight of their pursuer yet, the one chasing them for almost a day. What they felt, instead, was an overpowering Ryatsu steadily closing in on them. A Ryatsu that belonged to none other than King Baragon. The moment they identified it, they had taken off at their best speed. Mila Rose forcefully dragged her Zanpakuto across the granular white sand before nailing it on the wall. TCH. This hide-and-seek is suffocating me. I just want to beat him to death. Befitting her lioness characteristics, she was proud and ferocious. Her air and charization only enhanced those traits. Crushing Baragon was a bigger priority than her own life. Apache sat beside the wall, her gaze fixated on the wall in a daze. If only we had that power. Harabelle shook her head. We'll beat Baragon, but not today. Let's keep. She stopped abruptly, her attention captured by the egg. It twitched unexpectedly, its activity highly unusual considering its quiet demeanor over the last few days. Is it about to hatch? As Harabelle attempted to communicate with the egg, a surge of Ryatsu seeped out from it. She couldn't help but recall Kazuya's face upon sensing the Ryatsu. Sun chuckled lightly, her eyes twinkling with mirth. How cute! Did it sense Kazuya and start sending signals? The hatchling is calling out to its mother. Mila Rose chuckled, the egg shenanigans shifting her mood for the better. I still can't believe Skull's Zanpakuto is a literal egg. Apache jabbed Mila Rose's hand with her horn. Stop calling him mother. Call him father if you must. Why is that bothering you? Apache turned her head away at the question. It's gross to call a man mother. Harabelle-sama would agree with me. Harabelle was too engrossed in the egg to pay any attention to her surroundings. Surachi also observed the egg with sharp eyes. An unsettling feeling gnawed at her. Harabelle, it's almost at the level of a Jillian. Stop it before it reaches a Juchas. Harabelle patted the egg, whispering to it many words of comfort. Despite her efforts, she failed to stop the egg from sabotaging their location. Looking helplessly at Surachi, she shook her head. I don't think it understands us. A wave of frustration passed over Surachi's face as she rubbed her forehead. Blast. We may need to abandon the egg. What? The comment sparked immediate outrage in Apache. Her growl reverberated through the cave, reminiscent of a bloodthirsty wolf. Are you stupid? It's Kazuya's Zanpakuto. Do you want him to end up like you? But we're left with no other choice. Sun lightly poked Surachi's back with her tail. There's always a choice. Look, there's another path we can take. Following Sun's gaze, they found their attention drawn towards a dauntingly steep pathway leading further into the underground labyrinth. Mila Rose squinted, trying to penetrate the thick blanket of darkness. Where does it lead? What if it's a dead end? Sun scoffed at Mila Rose's hesitation. Then we go through the Garganta to the living world. We have better chances there than fighting Baragon. Harabelle weighed her options for a moment and decided to follow Sun's suggestion. Standing up, she beckoned the group. Let's go. Hold on! Surachi interjected. I remember what lies beneath Hueco Mundo, the forest of Minos. A forest filled with Jillians and Ajuchas. Apache's eyes glowed fiercely. Let's go. She was close to evolving into a Vasto Lord, so much that she could feel it in her bones. Consuming a bunch of Jillians would undoubtedly aid her transformation. The prospect of attaining the same level of power as Harabelle filled her with a thrill she couldn't suppress. I won't be useless against Baragon. Sun saw through Apache's desires. The deer was like an open book. Harabelle-sama, take Surachi and Mila Rose ahead. I have to talk to Apache. Huh? Somewhat surprised, Harabelle shot Apache a sharp glance. Their relationship hadn't been the brightest ever since Kazuya left. Now left alone with Sun, Apache curiously stared at the snake. What is it? Don't be consumed by your urges, Sung-sun whispered. Kazuya isn't interested in your strength, but your heart. That's all I'll say. It was Sung-sun's attempt to stop Apache from degrading into a typical hollow who kept devouring others for power. A path that might put her against Haribel. Apache paused for a moment before she lowered her head. I promise it is only until I become Vasto Lord. I'm so close. I want it, Sung-sun. I want it so badly. There was a crazed obsession in Apache's eyes, an immense lust for strength. It wasn't just about becoming a Vasto Lord for Apache now, it was to prove to Kazuya that she could also live up to her words. It was about pride. Sung-sun shared the ambition despite not admitting to it openly like Apache. I understand. Just try not to be too aggressive in front of Haribel-sama. I know. I am not denying Haribel's beliefs. This is a desperate time for us, and we need all the strength we can. Desperate times call for desperate measures. I got you if Haribel goes to you about the sacrifices, Sung-sun remarked teasingly. In exchange, help me become Vasto Lord after you're one. Apache raised her head, her wide eyes regarding Sung-sun. The snake's tongue flickered as she narrowed her pupils. Do you think I'm joking? Sung-sun shook her head. I'm serious, Apache. I refuse to stay the weakest in the group. Ah. I'll try. I just have to get Kazuya to make the same promise, and we're good to go. Chapter 54, Final Confrontation. Barely a mile away from the underground, a silhouette claimed the crest of a barren hill. His imposing figure was accentuated by an impressive afro of burnt orange and prominent sideburns. This was Gantenbane Mosqueda, the seventh Espada. His distinctive mask remnants were fashioned like sunglasses with 4 teeth protruding above each eye, allowing him to survey his surroundings through a central blue star embedded within the white plate. The target of his observation, Haribel's group. Swiveling his towering form, he addressed Barragan. The skeletal monarch of hollows rested upon a throne of bones, emanating a sinister aura. I sense a new Ajuchas amongst them. Interesting, Barragan said. The second Vasto Lord's whereabouts are still unknown. He had purposefully used his overpowering Ryatsu to force Haribel's hand, so she'd join up with her Vasto Lord aide, the one who had inspired Haribel's defiance against his rule. It hadn't happened yet. My lord, may I make a suggestion? Asked the blonde servant standing behind him. What is it, Evania? Why don't we capture them and get the information out of them? She was tired of stalking her prey. She wanted to pounce and devour them. Barragan casually dismissed her idea with an indifferent sweep of his skeletal hand. You underestimate Haribel. She'd rather embrace death than betray her people. She is a foolish woman like you. Barragan may have a cult of his own, but Evania had become his most devoted follower after he beat her into submission. I can make her speak, Evania said, her eyes glinting behind her white mask. Trust me, my lord. My aspect of death can bend her will. Submission? Barragan leaned his chin on his skeletal knuckles. Will it work on a Vasto Lord? Evania shook her head. But Tyr Haribel isn't alone. Heh. Go! I'll disown you if you fail. Evania kneeled on the ground. Thank you, my lord. I'll bring Tyr Haribel back alive with the information. I'll not let you get rid of me. With a swift tap of her feet, she took flight, heading towards Haribel's location. Barragan watched her fading figure before turning to Gantenbane. Make sure she is safe. Evania's abilities were strong, but they consumed too much of her Ryatsu. She was his useful toy, one that he didn't want to lose yet. Kneeling before his lord, Gantenbane responded. I'll guard her with my life. Once they departed, Barragan sat in solitude, a silent observer of the barren land. Despite his yearning for the thrill of battle, he felt somewhat uninspired, his energy sapped by the continuous hunt across Hueco Mundo. Hours passed as he sat there. Suddenly, his senses picked up 2 Ryatsu signatures, both surpassing the strength of an Ajucha's. Strangely, one of these spiritual pressures wasn't a hollow, but a Shinigami. Baragon beheld the approaching figures, his grasp instinctively clenching around his scythe-like axe. He hadn't come across such formidable Ryatsu in a while. From a hollow and a Shinigami, no less. The cure for his boredom came knocking at his door. Kazuya stopped, eyes squared on Baragon. Both him and Dordoni had guessed wrong. Baragon didn't send any Espada, he was so bored he left his kingdom to root out the rebels. What's even bizarre was Haribel's location, he could feel Haribel and others underneath him. Their Ryatsu was so faint as if they were hundreds of meters underground. They hid underground from Baragon? Smart chicks. Meanwhile, Yoruchi felt Baragon's Ryatsu lock on her, making her first stand on end. No hollow, apart from Kazuya, had given her this level of threat. Moments of recollection hit her as she observed Baragon's appearance. Isn't he Baragon Luzenbaron, the king of hollows? While there might be more hollows with the same look, none could possess a Ryatsu rivaling a senior captain. Kazuya shot her a surprised look. Yeah. He is the reason I ran away from this place. He is bad news, why are you getting ready to fight him? She almost yelled when she saw him cracking his knuckles in preparation for a fight. Kazuya spread his wings and continued stretching his arms. He is coming to start the fight, but I'll finish it. Besides, do you think he will let us leave now? Beholding Baragon in person, he could sense their Ryatsu to be on the same level. Arancarization had improved his already vast Ryatsu. I want to see oppression and senescence clash. With Kazuya's swift regeneration and Sonido, Baragon couldn't possibly kill him even if he wanted to. Facing Baragon one-on-one was the perfect opportunity to test the limits of his Arancar form. As Baragon arrived before him, he raised a hand in greeting. Hello, Baragon. Baragon set his intense Ryatsu on Kazuya. Teaming up with a Shinigami. How terribly pathetic for you. Kazuya smirked. Yoruchi, will you let him insult you like this? Heh. I was banished from the Siriidii ages ago. His words don't ruffle my fur. Ignoring her cat joke, he turned to Baragon. Tell me, self-proclaimed God King of Hueco Mundo, will I be called a Godslayer if I kill you? Baragon burst into laughter. Ant, you want to slay me? Just because you became a Vasto Lord Arancar, you think you can rival the God King? How comical. Then let it be I who paves the path for ants to become Godslayers. With a tremendous burst of energy, Kazuya blurred into motion, reappearing in a breath behind Baragon. But his movements were instantly slowed, as if treading through a swamp. The slow field around Baragon was a perfect counter to melee fighters. Kazuya had no choice but to retreat with Sonido. What an annoying ability. Any close combat with Baragon was useless as long as he surrounded himself in his senescence. Chapter 55, Sweet Revenge. Baragon was shrouded in a time dilation field which sapped the speed from anything within its range. Confronting him in hand-to-hand combat was akin to suicide. Kazuya frowned. Is it just there to protect him from attacks, or does it have hidden functions? He pondered, a maelstrom of theories whirling in his mind's depths as he prepared to unleash another onslaught. Propelling himself forward with the supersonic speed of Sonido, he paused at the brink of Baragon's time-twisted field, a vibrant Zero crackling ominously in his palm. The Zero ray and Baragon collided in a gargantuan eruption of searing light and churning energy, the force of the explosion sending shockwaves careening into the distance. As the chaotic display settled, Baragon re-emerged, covered in a shroud of inky purple-black energy. His immense Ryatsu and his senescence had weathered the brunt of Zero's impact. Baragon pointed his axe at Kazuya. These pathetic attacks won't affect me. I am the god of death. Everything ages and decays under my command. My power is the only absolute law in this world. Yoruchi let out a snort of derision at Baragon's arrogant declaration. General Yamamoto will wipe the floor with you. Baragon redirected his attention towards Yoruchi. He and his captain entourage barely sealed Ikamikadomo, the only hollow who came close to rivaling my divinity. If your captain is as powerful as you say, bring him to my kingdom. I'll slaughter him. Yoruichi had no idea about the fight between General Yamamoto and Ikumikidomo. Then again, she was barely 300 years old, a large number for mortals but an insignificant number compared to the Siriidi's long history. Still, you will be burned to ashes in the general's flames. Kazuya, you won't beat this guy by standing there. Kazuya thrust his arm at Baragon, who stood there, awaiting his attack. The king of Hueco Mundo was unwaveringly certain of his senescence's defensive capabilities. A surge of blue Ryatsu suddenly engulfed Baragon, threatening to overpower the dark purple aura that cloaked him. However, Baragon merely waved his hand. Suffer the dying breath. Respira. A shroud of black-purple energy exploded outward from Baragon, expanding ominously around him. Kazuya darted to Yoruichi, seized her, and raced a safe distance away from the deadly reach of Baragon's Respira. The spreading breath gnawed at everything it touched. Luckily, the barren landscape of Hueco Mundo remained untouched. The white sands of Hueco Mundo were the dust of fallen minos, and the skeletal trees were mere surface twigs of underground forests. "Let go of me!" Yoruichi wriggled out of his grasp, snarling. "Is that ability dangerous?" "Extremely." The self-proclaimed God King locked his gaze on Kazuya. "Even Reishi can't resist the decaying of time. Reishi-based abilities are useless against me. You really love flexing your powers, don't you?" Kazuya smirked. "Many kings died because of their foolish arrogance. Do you want to end up like them? I am above all the kings. I'm the God King of Hueco Mundo. You are an ant against me." Baragon's sentence hung unfinished as a sudden, immense pressure bore down on him. His robust Ryatsu strained under the weight, his temporal distortion field unable to slow down the Reishi-filled atmospheric air of Hueco Mundo. It was as if the world itself wanted to squeeze him. This was the same technique which had reduced Jillian's to a gory pulp. He simply manipulated Baragon's internal air pressure to an almost non-existent value. The result, a massive impact that may have injured Baragon. Kazuya could have done the same to Baragon's time dilation field if he understood its inner workings. With Baragon's immense Riryoku, he knew he couldn't brute force through the time field. Baragon waved his hand, releasing more Riryoku to strengthen his Iero. Impressive technique. Is this all you have? I'm starting to feel bored. As his words fell, a dense layer of Respira surrounded him. Axe clenched tightly in his hand, he vanished, materializing behind Kazuya in the blink of an eye. A single sweep of his weapon unleashed enough Respira to wipe out an army of hollows. The logical course of action would have been to use Sonido and flee. But Kazuya was not a creature of logic. He reached out through the fog of death and gripped the blade of Baragon's axe scythe. His arm withered and disintegrated until only skeletal remains were visible. His regeneration spurred into action, reassembling flesh over bone, sparking a horrific cycle of decomposition and renewal that made Yoruichi's skin crawl. Yet, a calm resolve flickered in Kazuya's eyes, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. Baragon's senses warned him of danger, but he was unable to pinpoint its cause. Overly prideful, he dismissed the very notion of Kazuya possessing an ability superior to senescence. Ha 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 ha. I underestimated your lunacy, insect. What do you hope to achieve by clutching my Zanpakuto? As Baragon attempted to wrench his weapon free, Kazuya's skeletal fingers held firm. A surge of blue Ryatsu poured from his decaying hand, enveloping the axe scythe. Say goodbye to your Zanpakuto, Baragon. At the echo of Kazuya's words, he clamped his skeletal fingers tighter. The force he exerted was barely enough to harm a low-ranking hollow, yet the Zanpakuto in his grasp shuddered before splintering into shards. The large Zanpakuto of Baragon was outside of the time field, allowing Kazuya to catch the arrogant king off guard and break it with his oppression. A chill breeze passed Kazuya's neck, and he retreated hastily using Sonido. Baragon unleashed a gigantic wave of Respira, covering almost 500 meters in depth. It truly seemed as if someone incurred the wrath of a god. Unforgivable. 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 Baragon's voice echoed through the barren landscape, seething with rage. You won't get away with this. Repent for your insolence against the god of Hueco Mundo and turn to dust. Kazuya couldn't have been happier to see Baragon suffer. He had to stay away from his precious companions because of Baragon's threats, even taking the massive risk of confronting Keisuke Urahara. How could he not relish this sweet, sweet revenge? Furious, Baragon chased Kazuya, frenziedly swinging massive amounts of Respira at him. Baragon couldn't match Kazuya's speed under normal circumstances. He could forget about catching Kazuya's combination of Sonido and wings in his furious state. Kazuya's movements were simply unpredictable in Baragon's state of madness. Hey, that stuff is dangerous. Stop chasing me like a yandere chases her love interest with a knife. Perish. 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 You worthless ant. Yoruichi observed the unfolding spectacle, a spark of amusement flickering in her golden eyes. This guy, ha ha. Baragon Lizenbaron, the most formidable hollow recorded in the Seriidii database, was being toyed with like a puppet on strings. No Shinigami would believe her tale unless she dragged them to this godforsaken wasteland to witness the spectacle. All her concerns about Kazuya dying were completely unfounded. He had dismantled Baragon's Zanpakuto with negligible effort, stripping the King of Hollows of a significant portion of his power. Popcorn would be perfect right now. She wasn't any less mischievous than her childhood friend. Chapter 56, Destruction. The root of Baragon's rage was less about the destruction of his Zanpakuto and more from the perpetrator of the act. The hollow he had dismissed and looked upon with scorn had turned the tables, making a mockery out of him. His pride was wounded, and for this humiliation, he had to destroy Kazuya. His provocation ability had also fueled Baragon's flames of fury. However furious Baragon might be, he maintained enough self-control to cease his rampage before it could exhaust all his Ryuryoku, an unfortunate outcome for the opportunist Kazuya. Sensing Baragon's reluctance, he halted and cast a smirking glance at Baragon from afar. Can't stomp the lowly ant now, huh? Baragon's fists clenched, the familiar grasp of his axe absent from his hands. Insolent worm. Ha ha ha. Yoruichi arrived by his side. You are having fun. I would do the same if I was in your situation. This guy had me worried for so long. It feels great to see him like this. Yoruichi's gaze shifted to Baragon, who hovered silently above them within the cloak of his Respira. His silent, brooding fury was unnerving on multiple levels. Fun and games aside, you have to eventually finish him. Since we're allies now, why don't you finish him for me, Shihoin-san? Despite shattering Baragon's Zanpakuto, the battle had reached an impasse. Kazuya was yet to discover a strategy to neutralize Baragon's time field, and he didn't possess enough firepower to obliterate Baragon completely. At the very least, he had decrypted the actual purpose of Baragon's time field. It counteracted the aging process of his aspect of death, enabling him to roleplay as the god of death and senescence. If the field was deactivated, Baragon would be consumed by his own power, essentially the manner in which Baragon met his demise in his battle against Soifon and the pink-haired vizard whose name he didn't remember. Yoruichi hissed. Stop joking. A melee fighter like me is the worst matchup for Baragon. I also don't have your regeneration to contest with his decay mist. She was guaranteed a death against Baragon's utterly broken ability. Kazuya was aware that she might fare even worse than Soifon if pitted against Baragon. After all, Soifon's Bankai was quite destructive for a ranged weapon. Then use your Zanpakuto's Bankai form. He was curious about Yoruichi's Zanpakuto, which never made it to the manga or anime. Even if it was weak, a Bankai was no joke. She shook her head in dismissal. It's insufficient against a Vasto Lord, let alone an Arrancar one. Truth be told, she had a mutual agreement with her Zanpakuto spirit. She was much stronger with her Shunko and Akuta than the Bankai release of her Zanpakuto. Her lazy Zanpakuto spirit also agreed with the sentiment. Keisuke should have an answer, Yoruichi muttered. Should we go back and ask him to whip something out of his lab? I'm not leaving without my friends. You can go if you want. I don't want to leave either. I have an idea. I don't know if it will work or not. May as well give it a shot. What's the worst that could happen? Yoruichi and Kazuya whispered to each other, refining the strategies proposed by the mischievous cat. They seemed to have forgotten Baragon's existence, or they stopped treating him like a threat. Baragon felt nauseous at the sight of Hollow and Shinigami collaborating like friends. He jutted his chin out arrogantly, his gaze scrutinizing Kazuya from his elevated position. Are you done strategizing against me? Yup. Be careful, Yoruichi said. You only have one chance. Finish it today. The strategy had a 50% chance to succeed on their first try and 0 if Baragon lived for another day. Only Kazuya could pull off this reckless strategy. Kazuya nodded and flew towards Baragon. Let's start round 2, old man. He used Sonido and unleashed another Zero Ray in Baragon's face, which was promptly eroded by the Respira. Kazuya didn't stop there and launched a flurry of Zero in quick succession. Each blue explosive ray consumed small chunks of Respira from Baragon. Regardless of how immense Baragon's Ryuryoku may be, it had a limit, like all hollows. He was exploiting his faster Ryuryoku recovery to drain Baragon. This won't achieve anything, Baragon growled and arrived behind Kazuya with Sonido. With a swipe of his hand, he sent a wave of Respira at him. Decay away. Kazuya flashed away with Sonido before Respira touched him. The self-proclaimed god of Hueco Mundo is struggling so hard. Just retire. I'll take care of Hueco Mundo far better than you ever did. Ha ha ha. Baragon just laughed in response. Even if I die today, you will have an army of Hollow chasing you down. Baragon trusted his mistresses and his most loyal woman Evania to avenge him. The fact that Evania will hunt down Kazuya's precious friends was just an icing on the cake. Kazuya raised his right hand and cut across his palm. As he curled his hand into a claw, a small blue orb crackled ominously, warping the fabric of space with its concentrated power. It was one of the Zero techniques he recalled Grimmjow using in his fight against Ichigo. You are using Grand Ray Zero against me? Baragon scoffed, unable to tear his eyes away from the destructive Zero. It's useless as well. You may have destroyed my Zanpakuto, but you cannot bring down God. Kazuya appeared behind Baragon with Sonido and released the Zero at point-blank range. Die, asshole. The ever-proud Baragon didn't flinch, instead redirecting his Respira to engulf the Grand Zero Ray. Kazuya spotted the opportunity he had been awaiting. He quickly transformed into his human form and flashed to Baragon's defenseless front, which was only protected by the time dilation field. Baragon looked at Kazuya, whose Ryatsu's signature had transitioned from that of a hollow to that of countless humans Baragon had consumed before. He refused to accept that his senses could be deceiving him. Who are you? Instead of indulging Baragon's curiosity, he conjured 2 katanas of pure Reisure. The higher concentration of Reisure in Hueco Mundo made his Reisure gathering easier, enhancing the power of his spirit weapons. He stepped closer, entering Baragon's time dilation field, and slashed across Baragon's chest. Baragon quickly used Sonido to retreat, only to feel a chill on his back. He directed his Respira towards his back, but Kazuya appeared in front of him using Harenkyaku, the Quincy equivalent of Shuimpa and Sonido. Quincy's techniques were far more potent on hollows, the same way a hollow was poisonous to a Quincy. Respira could easily counter the Quincy offense, but Baragon had become frightened from Kazuya's unconventional abilities. He wouldn't take any of Kazuya's attacks head-on. So, the king of Hueco Mundo used Sonido time and time again, but Kazuya consistently reached him in a split second as if he had locked onto his Ryatsu's signature and was tracking him effortlessly. Confronted with the threat of extermination, Baragon no longer used Sonido to evade attacks but to retreat to a safer location. The cat-and-mouse game concluded when Baragon ran out of Ryuryoku to generate more Respira or use Sonido. Kazuya thrust both katanas through the time dilation field, each entering Baragon's hollow eye socket. Just for another layer of security, he conjured a crossbow and launched a dozen bolts through Baragon, impaling every part of his body with blue bolts. Transforming back into his hollow form, he smirked at Baragon. I'm a godslayer now. Barragan sneered. Celebrate this moment, mortal. Evania will kill Haribel and your other friends, including the treacherous Surachi. Huh? Who is Evania? Barragan laughed at his question until he was utterly and thoroughly destroyed by the Quincy arrows. Chapter 57-58, Citadel of Dove. Sometime earlier. Apache groaned as another group of Jillians skittered away. The forest of Minos lived up to its haunting reputation, a twisted wilderness filled with towering trees and hordes of Minos, mainly Jillians. Yet, amid this writhing mass of potential prey, Apache had not yet claimed a single Jillian as her meal. She vengefully looked at the offender snuggled in Haribel's embrace. The egg pulsed with a Ryatsu that had peeked at the Ajucha's rank, casting an invisible net of fear that sent any approaching Jillians skittering for safety. Can this egg just stop for 10 minutes? Sung Sun's laughter danced through the darkened forest at her companion's misery. Fate doesn't wish for you to exceed me. As if held by invisible strings, Haribel froze in her stride, her eyes instinctively drawn to the towering ceiling shrouded in darkness. I feel his Ryatsu there. He might be fighting Barragan. Apache widened her eyes. Let's return. He, I won't allow you to return. An unexpected voice cut through their conversation, a playful note dancing within its depth. The owner of the voice, a blonde woman, descended gracefully before them, a hollow mask on her face. Her humanoid silhouette and her colossal Ryatsu was an undeniable testament to her formidable power. She was a Vasto Lord. Haribel stepped in front of everyone, assuming a protective stance. Who are you? Evania, the beloved servant of God King. She eyed Surachi with a predatory gaze. You all will pay the price of rebelling against the God King. Even the traitor Surachi Sanderwichi. Surachi responded with a growl, her teeth gritting in vexation. Blast you. I didn't betray Barragan. My loyalty was never with him. That doesn't absolve your sin of turning your back on our God. Surachi shot back. You weren't like this when you proclaimed yourself as the queen of Hueco Mundo. What did Barragan do to brainwash you like this? Mila Rose gasped. Queen of Hueco Mundo? This woman? With a solemn nod, Surachi affirmed, she used to be the strongest female hollow until recently when Haribel became a Vasto Lord. She had her own faction full of women who found her inspiring. How did she go from that to this bootlicking bitch? A shrug was Surachi's only response. I don't know. Evania scoffed at their exchange. Lord Barragan showed me how feeble I was in comparison. He taught me the only way to live and thrive, follow the one with greater power. The same hierarchy applies to you as long as you're a hollow living in the Hueco Mundo. Respect the Vasto Lord because we're your gods. Sharing a quick glance, Mila Rose and Surachi smirked at Evania's remark. Excuses of a loser, Mila Rose said, laughing. I'd rather die than follow a pathetic piece of trash. Thankfully, it was Haribel-sama who rescued me. She is a leader worth dying for. Surachi giggled. Kazuya isn't that bad of a leader either. At the very least he isn't stuck up about power and authority like Barragan. Evania's Ryatsu erupted violently as she heard insults being thrown at her lord. She held her throat, her head twisting stiffly. This is the fault of simple-minded fools like you, Surachi. You dwell on the past instead of looking into the future. I'm glad Lord Barragan didn't expose his ears to your foolish whispers. Era, aren't you stupidly romantic for a hollow? Sung Sun finally opened her mouth, eyes twinkling with mischief. You are almost on Apache's level of hopelessness. Mila Rose quickly hid her laughter behind her hand. Sung Sun speaking truth for the first time in her life. Apache growled, I'm not romantic. Growing increasingly vexed with their banter, Evania spread her arms wide, her head tilting upwards towards the cavernous ceiling. Suddenly, a pair of wings, as pristine as newly fallen snow, broke through her back. The sudden manifestation of wings sent Mila Rose's senses into a frenzy. What is this? Her ability most likely, Surachi cautioned, her voice barely a whisper. I have never seen her ability or heard anything about it. Stay on your toes. Haribel handed the egg to Mila Rose, her gaze steeled on Evania. Take the egg and return to Kazuya with everyone. I'll deal with her. Beneath her calm exterior, Haribel was a whirlwind of concern. She could feel the fierce battle unfolding above. The urgency to join Kazuya was overwhelming, yet she understood the value Surachi might offer with her knowledge of Baragon. The very notion of Kazuya in danger was driving her crazy. Mila Rose wanted to kill Evania on her own, but the scary look in Haribel's eyes made her flinch. Yes, Haribel-sama. Wait, we're leaving Haribel? Apache interjected. Shouldn't we all fight Toj? Mila Rose covered Apache's mouth. Just come, wait, I sense someone else. Surachi felt a familiar Ryatsu nearby. Narrowing her eyes, she saw an orange-haired man smirking from the distance. Gantenbane. He looks like an Arankar, said Sun, another Espada? Yes. Apache bit Mila Rose's hand, freeing her mouth. He doesn't look that strong. I can take him on myself, we need to hurry, though. Let's trash him together. Don't forget about me. Evania suddenly swung her right wing, and 4 glowing feathers shot out in Apache's direction. Haribel intercepted the projectiles with her sword arm, only to feel them impale her skin. The feather ignored her Ryatsu and directly penetrated her sword arm. As she tried to remove the feathers, it vanished, leaving bloody holes in her arm. Haribel focused her Ryoryoku to heal the wounds. The process was painstakingly slow as remnants of Evania's Ryatsu clung to her wounds. I have to finish it fast. Dear Haribel, cease your interference. Evania's voice thundered, already predicting Haribel's resistance to her ability. As a fellow Vasto Lord, you should align with me alongside your Vasto Lord friend. Join the ranks of Espada and Lord Baragon will let your transgressions slide. Haribel narrowed her eyes at the tempting peaceful proposal. Baragon has too much pride to do that. Lord Baragon said it himself. We have to preserve every one of Vasto Lord so the Shinigami will never think about invading our kingdom. Evania paused and pointed at the hollows rushing at Gantenbane. The Vasto Lord will live, but they need to die. I refuse. So that's your final stance, Evania whispered, her head tilting in an act of defiance. With an air of regality, she began to ascend, her figure floating eerily above the barren ground. Her wings unfurled gloriously. Rise to your queen. Trampa, Citadel of Dove. Without a moment's hesitation, Haribel unleashed a series of sonido. A blur of speed, she manifested in front of Evania and slashed viciously at her adversary's chest with her sword arm. Blood erupted in a scarlet geyser as Evania's chest was brutally torn open. Yet in the face of impending defeat, Evania's eyes wore a triumphant look. She swung down her wings with a force that rocked the air around them. The abrupt downstroke released a tempest of glowing feathers, each glistening ominously in the darkness. Like a barrage of ethereal arrows, they rained down upon the unsuspecting group of Mila Rose and others. Mila Rose, Apache, and Surachi barely managed to avoid the devastating attack through the sharp acceleration of Sonido. But Sun, whose Sonido ability was not as polished, found herself unable to escape the lightning-fast onslaught of deadly feathers. Haribel immediately reacted with a swift execution of Sonido and threw herself into the path of the incoming projectiles, forming a shield between the deadly feathers and the unshielded Sun. Cyan Sun saw Haribel shielding her from the rain of feathers. However, Haribel couldn't completely shield her large body. A couple of feathers snuck through and ruptured her scales. Arg! Her body was racked with torment as Evania's Ryatsu surged through her. The pain tore at the very fabric of her soul, inciting involuntary convulsions on the barren ground. Then, in a cruel twist, every sensation ebbed away, her eyelids heavy as the abyss began to draw her in. Don't resist. Evania's voice echoed ominously. Your consciousness will fall under my control. That is the power of my ability, Trampa, Citadel of Dove. You cannot escape it once you lose control, like a dove forever trapped in a birdcage. A disgusting ability that I haven't used since I submitted my life to Lord Barrigan. Evania took a perverse pride in her twisted power, a relic from her days as the self-proclaimed queen of Hueco Mundo. Meanwhile, Tyr Harabel was left a bloody mess after taking Evania's ability head-on. Gritting her teeth behind her mask, she cast a glance at Sung Sun who, despite her anguish, refused to succumb to Evania's ability. She pointed her sword arm at Evania. "I will kill you before it takes effect." In a flash of sonido, she was confronting Evania, whose former wound was already knitting itself back together. Harabel hesitated not a moment as she lashed out, her sword streaking towards Evania in a deadly arc. Barrigan's servant had pushed her to the brink with the attack on Sung Sun, igniting her killing intent. Evania nimbly avoided Harabel's furious attack, repositioning herself behind the vulnerable Sung Sun. Her hand grazed Sung Sun's scales, her gaze locked with Harabel's as if to declare her control over Sung Sun's life. "You are wrong, Harabel. My poison has already seeped into her soul. It's only a matter of time she breaks down and becomes my puppet. Right? Be a good girl and tell me where your Vasto Lord friend is." She held no intention to harm or kill Harabel. Her aim was straightforward, the acquisition of the Vasto Lord's location, even if it meant employing her disgusting ability. The life of a Juchas mattered nothing to her. Sung Sun hissed, refusing to fall under anyone's control. "Won't." Evania chuckled at Sung Sun's tenacity and slapped Sung Sun, "Stubborn little Juchas, surrender your soul to." Her words were abruptly cut off as Sung Sun retaliated with a sudden headbutt before she slammed her head onto the hard ground. Seizing the opportunity, Harabel rushed forward, her sword slicing Evania's throat open before she drove it mercilessly into Evania's chest and dragged it upward. Having divided her focus between regeneration and her unique ability, she lacked the necessary physical prowess to defend against Harabel's fury. Evania collapsed to the ground, her eyes wide in shock. With her brain sliced in half, she couldn't regenerate anymore. Harabel pivoted her attention towards Sung Sun. Once, twice, thrice, Sung Sun continuously struck the ground with her head, uncontrollably releasing her own Ryatsu to fight off Evania's seizing Ryatsu. The power of a Vasto Lord was beyond Sung Sun's capability to purge on her own. She chose her own way of dispelling Evania's Ryatsu from her body by taking off her mask and becoming an Arankar. Mila Rose abandoned Apache and Srirachi during their fight, rushing to Sung Sun's side. "Stop it, Snake! At this rate, you'll shatter your mask." Yet Sung Sun didn't stop her single-minded pursuit, prompting Mila Rose to physically intervene. Mila Rose allowed Sung Sun's head to rest on her shoulder, and she cradled Sung Sun's scales in her arms. "Sung Sun, try to understand. You can't do it without Kazuya. Let me die." Her words hung heavy in the air. She would prefer death to a fate of living as an empty vessel, devoid of consciousness. Mila Rose looked deep into Sung Sun's nearly shut eyes and gave her face a light slap. "Enough with this drama. You're not dying." "Sung Sun," Harabel murmured in a hushed whisper, her words echoing in the somber atmosphere. "Keep fighting. Kazuya is on his way." "Skull? Oh wait, he is zooming here." The moment Kazuya caught sight of the blood-soaked Harabel, his Ryatsu roared to life, blood rushing to his head. Without wasting any time, he materialized before Gantenbane and landed a thunderous punch squarely on the afro-haired man's face. Gantenbane's head snapped back and he crumpled to the ground, lifeless, the result of a single devastating punch. Without sparing a glance at the shocked Apache, Kazuya instantaneously teleported to the other side of the area where Harabel and Mila Rose were cradling the severely injured Sung Sun. Out of everyone in the group, Sung Sun was perhaps the last person Kazuya expected to be the most harmed. She might not have been the strongest, but she was certainly the most intelligent. Seeing her in this dire state was heartbreaking. Just then, Yoruchi arrived on the scene, finding the situation quite awkward for any kind of introduction. Unfamiliar with the physiological structure of a hollow, she felt at a loss to provide any helpful suggestions. "What happened?" demanded Kazuya as he ran his finger over Sung Sun's shell-like mask. If it's wounds, Sun, eat that guy over there. We have no time, Mila Rose urgently stated. Evania used her ability to control Snake's consciousness. Mind control? No way. There is still a chance if she becomes an Arrancar, Surachi intervened as she approached Kazuya, clutching his egg in her hands. When you break your mask, you are reborn and your Ryoryoku increases. She might be able to resist Evania's ability. Trusting the urgency of the situation, he abruptly pulled back his hand and punched Sun's hollow mask. In an instant, the mask splintered apart, and Sun was engulfed in a luminescent pink glow. Chapter 59, Rebirth. The atmosphere was thick with tension as everyone watched Sun undergo her transformation. Even Yoruichi, who was known for her playful nature, looked on with a level of fascination she hadn't expected to feel for a hollow. The determination and worry of Kazuya and his friends had somehow reached her, making her silently cheer for the snake hollow. Kazuya and his companions had changed her entire outlook on the hollow race in one single day. That hollows could be just as human as Shinigami. She finally comprehended fragments of Kasuke's obsession with the hollow race. It's almost done, Apache muttered. Sun, show yourself already. As the luminescent pink glow surrounding Sun receded, everyone held their breaths. Sun appeared in her resurrection form, just like Mila Rose had done following her transformation. While Mila Rose was strikingly alluring, Sun exuded a certain elegance. Her face was youthful and her hair, a dark shade of green that looked almost black, was styled in a classic Heim cut with long side bangs framing her face. A fragment of her shell-like mask rested on the right side of her head, and the 3 pink dots on either side of her face added to her overall charm. Her resurrection form was significantly smaller than her original form. She was now a stunning young woman with the lower body of a snake, a lamia. Upon emerging from her transformation, Sun's pale pink eyes immediately focused on Kazuya. She surged forward, throwing her arms around him in a tight embrace. Her thick tail coiled around him possessively, as though she had no intention of ever letting him go. Her grip around him was akin to vice, but he barely felt a thing with his Iero. You're back, she squealed, excitement dripping from her voice. Thanks for saving me. Mila Rose huffed quietly, looking away from the scene with a bit of a sulk. She felt a tinge of annoyance at Sun for completely overlooking her role in all of this. Meanwhile, Apache watched the display with a sharp gaze. She was glad for Sun's survival, but it also filled her with a sense of melancholy. The stark reality was beginning to hit her. She was the only one among them who hadn't assumed a humanoid form yet, despite yearning for it the most. I'll become a Vasto Lord first, then Arrancar. Her eyes briefly scanned over the 2 fresh corpses on the field, one a Vasto Lord and the other an Arrancar of a Juche's rank. She firmly believed that consuming them would elevate her rank. Be patient. Don't look desperate in front of Kazuya. She had to be careful not to tarnish her image in his eyes. With Mila Rose and Haribel already wrapping his heart around their fingers, she couldn't afford to give him more reasons to overlook her. Kazuya, meanwhile, smiled at Mila Rose and Apache while comforting Sun with gentle strokes on her back. He would have been filled with regret if anything had happened to her due to his decision to leave them. I don't deserve more credit than Surachi and Mila Rose. Breaking your mask was Surachi's idea. I just acted on it. Surachi smirked, pleased at his deep trust in her. He hadn't hesitated for a second and had immediately acted upon her advice. Her smugness was quickly replaced by surprise when Haribel snatched the egg from her hands. I wasn't going to eat it, she grumbled. Of course. Of course. I could sense everyone's worries. Every concern should be blamed on Evania. Sun separated from Kazuya and cast her gaze on Evania's lifeless body a few meters away. With a look of distaste, she spat in the direction of the corpse. Trying to enslave my mind, Barragan's slave. Sun felt a pang of disappointment that she hadn't been the one to end Evania's life. She wasn't one for physical torture, but she would have relished the opportunity to make Evania suffer in every possible way. She decided to devour Evania later, a small consolation for all the suffering. Well, she will reunite with her master in hell, he said with a chuckle, gaze drifting to the dead of Anya. Barragan's last curse didn't work out. We are finally free from the demicles hanging over us in the Hueco Mundo. What a relief! Everyone, except Yoruichi, looked shocked by this revelation. Apache, however, had mixed feelings about the news of Barragan's demise. Assisting Kazuya in killing Barragan would have been a prime opportunity to demonstrate her growth to him. But even that opportunity had been taken away from her, adding to her mounting frustration. She huffed. Didn't you say you have nothing to counter Barragan's unique ability? What does that matter now? Mila Rose shrugged. We didn't get to witness the downfall of God King. Harabelle's gaze softened. You worked really hard. I did. He nodded seriously. Lap pillow later? Sure. Sun released Kazuya from her grip and turned to Yoruichi. Kazuya, would you kindly introduce us to this black kitty who is using a Shinigami's Ryatsu? I feel a little off about her eavesdropping on our private conversations. Sun's question brought everyone's attention to Yoruichi. Even Kazuya had forgotten about her. She was way too silent, a complete opposite of her talkative demeanor when they were alone on the surface. Yoruichi let out a hearty chuckle. I am Kazuya's friend from the living world. Don't worry about me cleansing you. I'm no longer serving the Siriidii as a Shinigami. Her deep, masculine voice immediately triggered Mila Rose. This cat is a he? Do you have a problem with my gender? Yoruichi asked, amused. Assuming a cat's gender from their appearance is sexist. No, I didn't, Mila Rose quickly replied. I just assumed you were a girl. It's impossible to imagine Skull keeping a male companion. Kazuya didn't tell me all of his hollow friends were women. Yoruichi looked at Apache, whose gender was impossible to guess from eyes. I presume you're a girl. I am. While Yoruichi was busy introducing herself, Surachi stealthily approached and pounced at her. But Yoruichi nimbly jumped away, leading Surachi to fall flat on her face. Ha! You can't catch me. Her taunts only fueled Surachi's desire to catch her and pet her. Apache snuck away from the group, slinking toward Ivanya's lifeless form. The dense Ryatsu still clinging to the body was a heady, intoxicating scent that sent her senses reeling. The scent tantalized her predatory instincts, coaxing a pool of ravenous desire. Suddenly, Sun slithered onto the scene, her movements quick and graceful. Her delicate hand playfully masked her mouth. Don't steal my game, Ivania is mine to eat. Apache's eyes narrowed to mere slits, her Ryatsu flaring against her will. Let me. Sun looked between Apache and Ivania. All right. You can eat her. But you will owe me one for this. Being Sun's regular victim, Apache knew Sun could get very handy with her requests. A tense silence hung heavy between the two hollows as a clash of will ensued. Sun didn't blink, unwavering in her request. Deal or not? Apache nodded her head, unable to resist the promise of an evolution. Deal. Apache wasted no time then, throwing herself at the feast of Ryatsu before her. Each bite she took was filled with a desperate ferocity, a battle of survival and ambition. It was a sight that held an eerie beauty, an act of raw, primitive nature unfolding in its most visceral form. Chapter 60, Awaken. Apache threw her head back and let out a blood-curdling roar. It wasn't a roar of triumph, but one of frustration and rage. Sun watched her companion with a soft sigh. Even though Barragan's problem had been solved, the flame of Apache's struggle for inner peace still burned brightly. She ate both corpses and even gained a definite boost in strength, yet there was no Vasto Lord evolution. Just why isn't it happening? Apache whispered, staring blankly into the void. I'm getting stronger, but why won't I become a Vasto Lord? Sun folded back her exaggeratedly long sleeve and extended her hand to pat Apache's head. We, Hollows, live for a long time. There is no rush. Our biggest enemy has been sent to the afterlife by our dear Kazuya. Apache blinked in surprise at Sung-sun's unexpected display of kindness. I'm not doing it for strength. A playful arch of Sung-sun's eyebrow hinted at her curious amusement. What else could be your reason? Apache groaned Sung-sun's intentionally feigned ignorance. You wouldn't understand. Then make me understand. It's for, Apache's eyes shifted, landing on Kazuya. His comforting smile greeted her. Him. Apache can be honest too. Who could have imagined that? Sung-sun could never put a break to her teasing. Apache had no choice but to admit that Sung-sun was a perfect pair with someone like Kazuya. You are such a bitch, Apache grumbled, her earlier despair replaced by a renewed resolve after talking to Sung-sun. I need your help. Sung-sun. Kukuku. Speak up. I think Kazuya will leave for the living world with everyone. Can you stay in Hueco Mundo with me? She needed some company to keep hunting down more Hollow, the forest of Minos being the perfect place to fulfill her objective. Sung-sun's curiosity piqued, yet her playful smile didn't falter. Have you become addicted to my teasing? Is this a sign of your budding masochism? No! I want to start with the Minos here. Sung-sun narrowed her eyes, suddenly looking serious. I'm not sure if Haribel-sama will agree with this. That's why I'm asking you. Apache's voice dropped to a near whisper, her gaze lowered in a rare show of vulnerability. I'll be leading convincing Haribel to you. Sung-sun couldn't turn away from Apache's sincere request. You're such a handful, geez. I'll find some excuse. Until then, just go along with everyone. Okay. From a distance, Kazuya observed as Sung-sun signaled him with a wave of her long, billowing sleeve. A radiant smile danced on her lips, reflecting the ease with which she fulfilled her given task, taking care of Apache and addressing any issues that arose after consuming the two hollows. He had long anticipated Apache's failure. Her insatiable desire and unbridled hunger for power was in stark contrast to the harmony needed between instinct and awareness to become a Vasto Lord. She won't calm down without a proper lesson. He shelved thoughts of Apache for the time being, focusing instead on Haribel's wounds. Despite their superficial nature, the sight of her drenched in blood sent chills dancing down his spine. The egg she held was tainted, its surface smeared with her life essence. Haribel, we'll leave with Yoruichi after you heal your wounds. Why? From Haribel's perspective, there was no need to risk their lives in the living world now that Barragan had been vanquished. They could comfortably reside in Hueco Mundo for as long as they wished. Haribel, do you trust me? I do, but... No buts. Just come with me. Haribel couldn't reject him when he used such a cheap but effective tactic against her. Nodding her head, she used her Ryatsu to dispel the blood covering her. She then turned her attention to the blood-soaked egg, her expression twisting into a frown. Her resurrection ability was all about creation and manipulation of water. She had yet to discover anything about her innate ability in her Vasto Lord form, only because of lack of water in Hueco Mundo. It was one of the reasons he wanted to take her to the living world. She might learn her ability. His thought abruptly halted, eyes widening as the blood began to detach from the egg's surface as if manipulated by an invisible force. Haribel looked away from the egg, and the blood intriguingly followed her gaze. Haribel awakened her innate ability when she couldn't bear to see the egg in a filthy state. She had the power to create and manipulate water out of nothing. For now she seemed to only have the power of water manipulation. Should I say, as expected of Mommy Haribel? Mila Rose snickered at his comment. The feelings, the dark-skinned Arankar paused as Haribel placed her sword arm around her neck. Haribel-sama? Do not bring up our private conversations. Haribel gently pushed Mila Rose and gave a soft-eyed glance to Kazuya. Shall we go now? What was? Shall we go now? Haribel repeated her question, her eyes closing as she tilted her head slightly. Kazuya, shall we go now? An icy aura emanated from Haribel, filling the air with an unmistakable chill. It was as if she projected an unspoken warning, argue with me now and you'll regret it. Mila Rose shivered, tugged at Kazuya's shirt. Just say yes, damn it. Do you want all of us to die? Ignoring the urgency, he stood his ground. Harabel, I'm not letting this slide. We will talk about this later, alone. His stern tone left Harabel with wide eyes. She couldn't threaten her way out of the situation when Kazuya was involved. Now she had no choice but to engage in an embarrassment-filled conversation about her instincts and the way she treated him. Okay, her voice was subdued, a clear indication of her discomfort. Kazuya smiled comfortingly. I'll be gentle, Harabel. Finished with Harabel, he looked at the figures disappearing into the distance. Yoruichi was clearly having a blast being chased by Surachi, who displayed an admirable level of tenacity, much like their battle a few days ago. Is she into cats? A sudden, spine-chilling glare jerked him out of his thoughts. Swiveling around, he found himself staring at a figure sporting a hollow mask. Despite the intimidating disguise, the figure's Ryatsu was unmistakably that of a Shinigami. A Shinigami impersonating as a hollow? Wait, I think I remember him from the filler arc. He didn't remember the Shinigami's name, but he vaguely recalled the backstory behind this Shinigami role-playing as a hollow. The Shinigami had followed some hollows inside a Garganta and ended up in the forest of Minos. Rather than returning home, the Shinigami decided to stay and kill as many hollows as possible. Are you stupid enough to attack too, Vasto Lord? Sure enough, the Shinigami tactically retreated after a few cautious glances. Kazuya sighed in relief. The last thing he wanted was to kill a Shinigami in Yoruichi's presence. That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on part 2. Peace.